Chapter 1432. The two quasi-sage great venerables took 3 steps back as they stared at Shao Chen. Their meaning was obvious. They no longer had any thoughts of competing with Shao Chen for the 10,000 years spiritual milk pool. He had suppressed the 3 quasi-sage sects with his own strength. Of course, the 3 quasi-sage sects were not afraid of Shao Chen, but the spirit tablet in Shao Chen's hand. That was a treasure comparable to the full blow of the great sage, who knew how many pieces Shao Chen had, so no one was willing to risk their lives to try. Although the treasure was good, one needed to be alive to enjoy it. Therefore, the 3 quasi-sage sects chose to bow their heads in such a situation. There was no other way. Who would have thought that Shao Chen would appear here? It was also because the matter of Mount Yuehua did not attract the attention of the Heavenly Palace. Otherwise, if the experts of the Heavenly Palace appeared here, Shao Chen would not have been able to obtain the 10,000 years spiritual milk pool. Unfortunately, the Heavenly Palace did not pay attention to the matter of Mount Yuehua. Moreover, even if the Heavenly Palace received the news now, it would be too late. By the time the people of the Heavenly Palace arrived, Shao Chen would have already entered the 10,000 years spiritual milk pool and started cultivating. There was a touch of bitterness on their faces. Such a supreme treasure had been obtained by a human in the end. Unfortunately, no one present could do anything about it. No one dared to provoke Shao Chen at this time. The 2 quasi-sage great venerables leading the group had already lost their lives and did not dare to have any thoughts about the 10,000 years spiritual milk pool. Shao Chen walked past the 2 and glanced at them indifferently. Then, he directly came to the side of the 10,000 years spiritual milk pool, which was the huge crack in the ground. This circular crack was the entrance to the 10,000 years spiritual milk pool, which led straight into the mountain. Without much hesitation, Shao Chen directly jumped down. Not long after Shao Chen jumped into the crack, a layer of pure spiritual energy appeared outside the crack. Soon, this spiritual energy formed a protective shield that was almost visible to the naked eye. This was the self-protection of the 10,000-year spirit milk pool. It also meant that Shao Chen had probably entered the 10,000-year spirit milk pool. Everyone's guess was right. At this time, Shao Chen had indeed entered the 10,000-year spirit milk pool. The pool was not big, at most 10 meters in diameter. However, it was not deep, at least 7 to 8 meters deep. A depth of 7 to 8 meters was already very good. One had to know that this was not water, but spiritual liquid that had been accumulated for countless years. Every drop could be said to be incomparably precious. The moment Shao Chen entered the milky white spiritual liquid, he felt as if his body was enveloped by an extremely pure energy. The pores all over his body unconsciously opened as they greedily absorbed the energy within the spiritual liquid. This was the first time that Shao Chen had personally experienced the terror of this 10,000-year spirit milk pool. He couldn't help but sigh. It's indeed a rare treasure. With this 10,000-year spirit milk pool, I should be able to break through to the sage realm. To be honest, Shao Chen didn't have much confidence in breaking through to the sage realm. Even if he was only half a step away from the sage realm, it was still the same. However, the appearance of this 10,000-year spirit milk pool gave Shao Chen the hope of making a breakthrough. As long as he could enter the sage realm, Shao Chen would have the confidence to compete with those heavenly dipper saint sons. There was almost no need to actively refine it. Being in this 10,000-year spirit milk pool, Shao Chen could already feel that his cultivation was increasing. Judging from the size of this 10,000-year spirit milk pool, it should be more than 10,000 years old. It should be at least 50,000 years old. Otherwise, it would be impossible to accumulate so much spiritual liquid. It was really a good thing. After getting used to it for a while, Shao Chen closed his eyes and began to cultivate. Being able to cultivate in the 10,000-year spirit milk pool was indeed a very happy thing. Unfortunately, such an opportunity was obviously rare. For Xiao Chen, this was probably the only time in his life. After all, the amount of 10,000-year spirit milk pools was really too little. Xiao Chen had already begun to cultivate. In the outside world, on Mount Yuehua, the cultivators who had rushed over from all over slowly dispersed after seeing that Xiao Chen had seized the 10,000-year spirit milk pool in a domineering manner. After all, Xiao Chen had already entered the 10,000-year spirit milk pool. As a result, this 10,000-year spirit milk pool was obviously useless. When Xiao Chen came out of seclusion, there would probably be nothing left of this 10,000-year spirit milk pool. Many people chose to leave. There was no objection to staying here. However, there were still some people who chose to stay. In fact, they were just curious to see if Xiao Chen could make a breakthrough to the Sage Realm with the help of this 10,000-year spirit milk pool. There were still a few people who chose to stay on Mount Yuehua or Myriad Mountain Town. Just like that, time passed slowly. 5 days later, a cold-looking young man wearing a black robe arrived at Myriad Mountain Town. At a glance, this young man gave off a cold and sinister feeling. Moreover, his aura was also extremely cold. It was as though no one dared to approach him. However, the appearance of this cold-looking young man shook the entire Myriad Mountain Town and even Mount Yuehua. This was because this person was the chosen of the Heavenly Palace, Tianhe Peak, who was currently ranked 36th on the Saint ranking. Tianhe Peak had immediately left the Heavenly Palace half a month ago. First, he made a trip to Ethereal City. After that, Tianhe Peak searched everywhere for Xiao Chen in the Heavenly Clan's territory. Unfortunately, Tianhe Peak was unable to find Xiao Chen even after half a month. In the end, 2 days ago, Tianhe Peak heard that a 10,000-year spirit milk pool had appeared on Mount Yuehua. Moreover, this 10,000-year spirit milk pool had been won by Xiao Chen. Upon hearing this news, Tianhe Peak did not hesitate at all. He immediately rushed to Myriad Mountain Town. Tianhe Peak did not stay in Myriad Mountain Town. Instead, he headed straight for Yuehua Mountain. As the news of Tianhe Peak's appearance spread, many cultivators who were still in Myriad Mountain Town followed closely behind and set foot on Yuehua Mountain again. It was no longer as lively as it had been 3 days ago. At this moment, Mount Yuehua seemed somewhat deserted. Originally, there was nothing much on Mount Yuehua. If it were not for the appearance of the 10,000-year spirit milk pool, many people would not have even heard of Mount Yuehua. Tianhe Peak took the lead and directly stepped onto the peak of Mount Yuehua. Many Heavenly Clan cultivators followed behind him from afar. Tianhe Peak could not be bothered with these people. When he reached the peak, he calmly looked at the crack that led to the 10,000-year spirit milk pool. However, at this moment it was no longer passable. It had been completely sealed off by a layer of pure spiritual energy. After observing for a moment, Tianhe Peak suddenly threw a punch. However, the layer of spiritual energy did not move at all. There was not even the slightest ripple. As expected, it was impossible to forcefully break through. Only after Xiao Chen finished absorbing the spiritual liquid in the 10,000-year spirit milk pool would this layer of spiritual energy automatically disappear. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1433. It was impossible to break through this layer of heaven and earth spirit chi defense. Even Tianmushi wouldn't be able to break through this layer of heaven and earth spirit chi defense, let alone Tianhe Peak. Originally, he had wanted to kill Xiao Chen to avenge Mo Juedai. However, not only had he failed, but he had even allowed Xiao Chen to obtain the 10,000-year spiritual milk pool. This made Tianhe Peak's killing intent even more intense. In addition to the killing intent in his heart, Tianhe Peak also felt a trace of jealousy. It was the 10,000-year spiritual milk pool. Even Tianhe Peak wanted to obtain it. Unfortunately, he was a step too late and Xiao Chen had beaten him to it. Now, he could only watch as Xiao Chen enjoyed the 10,000-year spiritual milk pool alone. One could imagine how Tian He Peak felt. The killing intent in Tian He Peak's eyes grew even more intense as he looked at the crack in front of him. Shao Chen, you deserve to die. After a long while, Tian He Peak softly muttered to himself. He then sat down with his legs crossed, clearly intending to wait for Shao Chen to come out of his seclusion. Although the energy in the 10,000-year spiritual milk pool was extremely pure, there would come a time when it would be completely exhausted. Once the energy in the pool was completely exhausted, the layer of spiritual energy blocking the entrance of the cave would automatically dissipate. At that time, it would be Tian He Peak's turn to kill Shao Chen. They stood guard at the entrance of the cave. From this, it could be seen just how strong Tian He Peak's killing intent towards Shao Chen was. One must know that it would take at least a year to completely refine the spiritual milk in a 10,000-year spiritual milk pool. After all, this was the result of tens of thousands of years of accumulation. Naturally, one would not be able to completely refine it in a short period of time. In order to kill Shao Chen, Tian He Peak had actually decided to wait here for a year. One could see just how much killing intent he had for Shao Chen had reached. As they watched Tian He Peak sit down on the mountain peak, the numerous cultivators who had been following Tian He Peak from afar began to discuss in soft voices. The Tian He Peak chosen can't be planning to wait here until Shao Chen comes out, right? That should be it. What kind of enmity is this? It would take at least a year to refine a 10,000-year-old pool of spirit milk, and yet he went so far as to kick the shit out of it. The holy son of Heavenly River Peak is really. Everyone was slightly surprised by Tian He Peak's decision. Because if there wasn't any deep enmity between them, it was obviously impossible for them to not hesitate to kill Shao Chen. However, after a brief moment of shock, many cultivators became excited. Since Tian He Peak was so determined to kill Shao Chen, then Shao Chen was probably dead for sure. Even if he had refined a 10,000-year spirit milk pool, it was still impossible for him to be a match for Tian He Peak. Between Shao Chen and Tian He Feng, the celestial race martial artists naturally favored Tian He Feng more. After all, Tian He Feng was the third-ranked holy son on the saint rankings. In the entire younger generation of the celestial race, only Tian Fun and Tian Mushi were stronger than Tian He Feng. To put it bluntly, Tian He Feng and Mo Juedai were completely incomparable. Although the difference between the two of them on the saint rankings was only 9 places, the gap between them wasn't that simple. Tian He Feng was already a heavenly dipper saint, while Mo Juedai was still a disha saint. As such, the difference between the two of them was like heaven and earth. It was as if they could already see the scene of Shao Chen being killed by Tian He Feng. Of course, Shao Chen naturally didn't know about this. At this moment, Shao Chen was completely immersed in cultivation. Time passed day by day, and in the blink of an eye, a year had passed. During this year, Tian He Feng indeed didn't leave. He directly cultivated on Mount Yuehua, cultivating while waiting for Shao Chen to come out of seclusion. During this year, news about Tian He Feng had spread throughout the celestial race. Many celestial race martialists knew that Tian He Feng was waiting for Shao Chen to come out of seclusion so that he could kill him. Some people had even dug out the reason why Tian He Feng was so determined to kill Shao Chen. It was because of Mo Juedai. Tian He Feng and Mo Juedai had an extremely good relationship in the Celestial Palace. The two of them had gone out to train together many times. Mo Juedai was in the hands of Shao Chen. As his good friend, it was reasonable for Tian He Feng to avenge him. After an entire year, many people in the celestial race had already gathered their attention on Mount Yuehua. Furthermore, Mount Yuehua, which had originally become cold and cheerless, became lively again during this year. Many martialists once again gathered there. Of course, these people weren't there for any treasures. They just wanted to witness a battle between the saints on the saint rankings with their own eyes. Or rather, the fall of a saint-ranking saint. After all, a battle between the saints on the saint rankings was rare. Furthermore, the one who took action this time was the third saint of the celestial race, Tian He Feng, who was ranked 36th beside him. It had been many years since Tian He Feng had taken action in front of others. Although there were rumors that Tian He Feng was very strong, no one had seen how strong he was. There were only rumors, but no one had witnessed it with their own eyes. Because of this, many people were attracted to Mount Yuehua because they had the opportunity to witness Tian He Feng's battle with their own eyes. Time passed day by day. Just like that, another 2 months had passed. Everyone in the outside world was anxiously waiting for Xiao Chen to come out of seclusion. At this moment, Xiao Chen, who was in the 10,000-year spiritual milk pool, was unaware of the situation outside. At this moment, Xiao Chen's cultivation had reached the most critical point. He was about to break through. That's right. After more than a year of bitter cultivation, Xiao Chen's cultivation had finally reached the critical point of breaking through to the saint stage. At this moment, the pool, which was originally 7 or 8 meters deep, had reached the bottom. There was only about 1 meter left. With his eyes closed, Xiao Chen could clearly feel the barrier to breaking through to the saint stage. It all depended on this moment to break through to the saint stage in one fell swoop. Mobilizing the spiritual energy in his body, Xiao Chen began to continuously attack the barrier to the saint stage. However, it was obviously not easy to break through to the saint stage. The barrier to breaking through to the saint stage was like an iron bastion. After countless attempts, all of them ended in failure. In the end, Xiao Chen's forehead was covered with sweat. Even so, Xiao Chen did not plan to give up. If he could not break through to the saint stage this time, it would take a long time before he could try again. Xiao Chen obviously did not have that much time. Therefore, no matter what, he must successfully break through to the saint stage this time. Again and again, Xiao Chen persistently tried to break through. Finally, after countless failures, a muffled sound came from Xiao Chen's body. The barrier to the breakthrough of the saint plane was finally broken through. His aura suddenly skyrocketed. At the same time, the remaining spiritual liquid in the 10,000-year spiritual milk pool was rapidly absorbed into Xiao Chen's body at a speed visible to the naked eye. At this point, the 10,000-year spiritual milk pool was completely dried up. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 1434. His cultivation base continued to rise, and he soon broke through the half-saint realm and reached the saint realm. After more than a year of hard work, Xiao Chen finally broke through to the saint realm with the help of the 10,000-year spiritual milk pool. At the same time, Xiao Chen also absorbed the last trace of spiritual milk in the 10,000-year spiritual milk pool. As a result, the layer of spiritual energy defense naturally dissipated. Tian He Feng, who had been waiting for more than a year at the peak of Mount Yuehua, suddenly opened his eyes and looked at the crack on the mountain peak. There was no longer any spiritual energy barrier there. You're finally willing to come out. Xiao Chen, let's see what you can do this time, Tian He Feng said coldly as he stood up. He was finally going to come out of seclusion. However, as soon as Tian He Feng finished speaking, a spatial black hole appeared in the sky. Countless bolts of lightning could be seen crisscrossing from the black hole. Many cultivators around Mount Yuehua, including Tian He Feng, were shocked when they saw the sudden appearance of the spatial black hole and the endless bolts of lightning. Someone even said subconsciously, "This is heavenly punishment of the saint realm." Everyone knew that heavenly punishment would descend when a cultivator broke through to the saint realm. Only by successfully passing through heavenly punishment could one be considered a true saint. The appearance of heavenly punishment meant that someone was about to break through to the saint realm. Everyone involuntarily looked at the peak of the mountain. As expected, a terrifying aura shot up from the crack on the mountain peak. This aura had already reached the saint realm. Xiao Chen had actually broken through to the saint realm. This was something that no one had expected. When Xiao Chen entered the 10,000-year spiritual milk pool more than a year ago, his cultivation base was only at the half-step saint realm. Now, with the help of the 10,000-year spiritual milk pool, Xiao Chen had forcibly stepped into the saint realm. One could imagine the improvement a chosen on the saint ranking would experience when he broke through to the saint stage. It was no exaggeration to say that even quasi-saint great sovereigns wouldn't dare underestimate a chosen on the saint ranking who had broken through to the saint stage. Previously, Xiao Chen might have had to rely on external forces to contend against a great venerate of the quasi-sage realm, like the Mo clan's ancestor. However, after breaking through to the saint realm, Xiao Chen was completely capable of fighting him. This was a gap of an entire cultivation level, yet the holy child of the saint rankings was able to accomplish this. In particular, Xiao Chen's talent was so high, and the increase in his battle prowess after his breakthrough would only be even more terrifying. Tianhe Peak's complexion turned somewhat unsightly at this time. Xiao Chen had broken through to the sage realm. This was something that Tianhe Peak hadn't expected. However, so what? He was a saint as well. Moreover, his Tianhe Peak was ranked higher than Xiao Chen on the saint rankings. So, Tianhe Peak wasn't afraid of fighting Xiao Chen. This was the confidence of a chosen on the saint ranking. Unfortunately, Tianhe Peak didn't know that the current Xiao Chen was completely different from a year ago. As the aura became denser, Xiao Chen's figure slowly flew up from the mountain. However, when he saw so many people around Tianhe Peak and Yuehua Mountain, Xiao Chen was stunned at first. However, now wasn't the time to care about this. The most important thing now was to pass through the divine punishment. Xiao Chen paid no attention to Tianhe Peak. He flew all the way to the sky, and Tianhe Peak consciously retreated a great distance away from him. After all, Xiao Chen was going to pass through the divine punishment. If they were too close to him, it was very likely that they would be affected by the divine punishment. This was definitely not worth it. No one could stop the divine punishment from appearing. Therefore, Tianhe Peak could only wait for Xiao Chen to pass through the divine punishment. Ignoring the people around Yuehua Mountain, Xiao Chen looked calmly at the divine punishment in the sky. His eyes flashed with excitement as he said, "Is this the divine punishment?" This was the first time that Xiao Chen was going through the divine punishment. At this moment, he could clearly feel that he had been locked onto by several things. It was as if it was useless no matter where he ran. This was very normal. There was no way to avoid the divine punishment. One could only choose to resist it. Once the divine punishment locked onto him, there was no other way but to resist it. His eyes were fixed on the black hole in the sky. At this moment, the first divine punishment suddenly fell and hit Xiao Chen's body hard. The divine lightning fell from the sky and instantly enveloped Xiao Chen. The divine lightning was very powerful. However, after it hit Xiao Chen discovered that his tempered battle body could absorb the power of the divine punishment to temper his body. This discovery made Xiao Chen overjoyed. It was already difficult to improve the tempered body of 100 refinements. Now that the heavenly punishment had a tempering effect on his tempered body of 100 refinements, was it not equivalent to a supreme treasure for Xiao Chen? Xiao Chen wasn't nervous about facing the divine punishment. On the contrary, he was completely excited at this time. After the first divine punishment fell, Xiao Chen had a smile on his face as he waited for the second divine punishment to fall. Generally speaking, there should be 3 divine punishments in the saint realm. Soon, all 3 divine punishments fell, and Xiao Chen endured them one by one. However, just when everyone thought that the divine punishment was about to disappear, the 4th divine punishment came. Everyone was clearly stunned when they saw this. Then, they sighed inwardly. As expected of a chosen on the saint rankings. Even when breaking through to the saint realm, there was one more divine punishment than an ordinary saint. Generally speaking, the more divine punishment there was, the higher one's talent and strength. Everyone was shocked, but Tianhe Peak still had a calm expression on his face. It was only 4 divine punishments. When Tianhe Peak broke through to the Saint Realm, he had endured 5 divine punishments. He didn't care that Shao Chen actually had 1 more divine punishment. However, just when Tianhe Peak thought that he could still maintain his calm, the 5th divine punishment fell. At this time, Tianhe Peak's expression changed slightly. Not long after, when the 5th heavenly punishment ended, the 6th heavenly punishment appeared again. As the divine punishment descended, everyone present could no longer maintain their calm. After almost an hour, the black hole above Shao Chen's head finally closed slowly. At the same time, even Tianhe Peak couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. 7 divine punishments? That's right. Shao Chen had broken through to the Saint Realm and had endured 7 divine punishments. That was 2 more than Tianhe Peak. After all, 2 more divine punishments meant that Shao Chen's talent was definitely higher than Tianhe Peak. As a heavenly dipper saint, Tianhe Peak's talent was naturally not low. It could even be said that he was at the peak. However, Shao Chen had still surpassed him. He couldn't believe that Shao Chen had actually endured 7 divine punishments. Tianhe Peak's expression became slightly complicated. Moreover, after enduring the 7 divine punishments, Shao Chen actually revealed a trace of disappointment. It was as if he hadn't had enough. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1435. Shao Chen was indeed a little disappointed. After all, the heavenly punishment could temper his body. If he could get a few more strikes, Shao Chen's tempered battle body would be even stronger. However, at that moment, Tianhe Peak appeared in front of Shao Chen. Now that the heavenly punishment had ended, it was time for Tianhe Peak to take revenge. Shao Chen, he shouted in a deep voice. Shao Chen's gaze also fell on Tianhe Peak. Seeing that the two of them were finally facing each other, the surrounding people revealed excited expressions. After waiting here for so long, they were finally going to see the battle between the 2 saints on the saint rankings. Shao Chen did not know who Tianhe Peak was, but he was still able to sense a strong hostility from the man, as well as a faint murderous intent. This person wanted to kill him. Shao Chen's gaze turned cold when he sensed the killing intent. Then, he heard Tianhe Peak's deep voice. My name is Tianhe Peak. You should know me. You killed Mo Juedai, right? He had no intention of hiding his intentions. In Tianhe Peak's opinion, even though Shao Chen had broken through to the saint stage and survived 7 heavenly punishment, Shao Chen had only just entered the saint stage. On the other hand, Tianhe Peak had entered the saint stage several years ago. In terms of strength, Tianhe Peak was still very confident in himself. Tianhe Peak had introduced himself and even mentioned Mo Juedai's name. Shao Chen quickly guessed the purpose of his visit. Tianhe Peak was the 3rd saint in the Sky Clan and ranked 36th on the saint rankings. It seemed like he was here to take revenge for Mo Juedai. Originally, after breaking through to the saint stage, Shao Chen was wondering if he could challenge the heavenly dipper saint. After all, more than a year had passed. There was not much time left until the 3-year period that Long Yang had told him. It was time to challenge the position of the heavenly dipper saint. The appearance of Tianhe Peak was undoubtedly the best choice for Shao Chen. After all, Tianhe Peak was ranked at the bottom of the Tiangang saint rankings. Among the 36 Tiangang saints on the saint rankings, Tianhe Peak should be the weakest. As such, Tianhe Peak was naturally the most suitable opponent for Shao Chen. A smile flashed in Shao Chen's eyes. This Tianhe Peak was not bad. They took the initiative to send themselves to him. Shao Chen's expression was calm as he spoke in an indifferent tone. Why are you asking when you already know the answer? Since you're already here, what's the point of asking? If you want to avenge Mo Juedai, then just say it. Mo Juedai was killed by him in the first place, so what was the point of saying all this now? Hearing Shao Chen's words, Tianhe Peak's aura was already faintly discernible. Since you admit it, that's good. Shao Chun, I can give you a chance now. If you're willing to stand guard in front of Mo Juadai's grave for 3 years, I can let you go. Guard the coffin for 3 years? Only Tian Hafeng could say something like this. Hearing this, Shao Chun smiled and said, Do you think that's possible? No need to talk nonsense. If you want to fight, then come. He was the one who killed Mo Juadai, and now he wanted Shao Chun to stand guard for him for 3 years. This was simply a joke. Without even thinking about it, Shao Chun directly refused. Tian He-Peek's face sank when he heard this, and a soaring aura instantly erupted from his body. It seemed that he had reached the saint stage. Although Tian He-Peek's cultivation was only at the initial saint stage, after his aura erupted, the might was no weaker than those veteran saints. It could be said to be extremely terrifying. If he had encountered Tian He-Peek a year ago, Shao Chun admitted that he would definitely not be a match for him. But now, Shao Chun had also broken through to the saint stage. The two of them had the same cultivation, so Shao Chun had no fear at all. Without backing down, Shao Chun's aura also soared into the sky. Although Shao Chun had just broken through to the saint stage, his aura was not much weaker than Tian He-Peek. The last spiritual liquid in the 10,000-year spiritual milk pool had completely stabilized Shao Chun's cultivation. Moreover, with Shao Chun's deep foundation, his aura would not be unstable after breaking through. His aura was not much weaker than Tian He-Peek. Sensing Shao Chun's aura and power, a solemn look flashed across Tian He-Peek's eyes. Shao Chun was indeed not a simple person. However, his aura was so stable after just breaking through to the saint stage. It was clear that his foundation was deep. Shao Chun's strength surprised Tian He-Peek, but it was obviously impossible for him to make Tian He-Peek back down with just his aura. To be able to become a saint on the saint rankings, Tian He-Peek naturally could not be a piece of trash. He also had his own pride. The fighting spirit of the two of them continued to condense. Looking at the two of them in the sky, the surrounding Tian clans all became nervous. After waiting for so long, the battle between the saints on the saint rankings had finally begun. Moreover, judging from their auras, this battle was obviously not going to be simple. Both of their auras were extremely terrifying. At this moment, even a saint at the perfect saint stage would probably feel pressured standing in front of them. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Tian He-Peek took the lead to attack. Rays of white light gathered on his right palm, and then he suddenly slapped it out. As Tian Hafeng's palm fell, a huge palm of spiritual power instantly took shape and came crashing down on Shao Chun. The palm of spiritual energy emitted a dazzling white light. The terrifying aura caused many of the surrounding martialists' expressions to change unconsciously. However, Shao Chun, who was facing the palm of spiritual energy, did not change his expression at all. On the contrary, a faint smile appeared on his face. What's the point of probing like this? Tian He-Peek, if you want to fight, then show me your true strength. Tian He-Peek's palm was just an ordinary attack. He did not even use the unique mark of the Tian clan. It was simply too easy to deal with Shao Chun with such a simple attack. Perhaps this was just Tian He-Peek's probing. He wanted to see how strong Shao Chun was. Unfortunately, such a test was completely meaningless to Shao Chun. At their level, such a useless test was simply a waste of time. Shao Chun did not think that he could easily defeat Tian He-Peek, but Tian He-Peek could not easily defeat Shao Chun either. Therefore, if they wanted to determine the winner, they would probably have to show their true strength. As soon as he finished speaking, Shao Chun also casually punched out. A golden fist light instantly exploded and collided with the palm of spiritual energy. The golden fist light suddenly exploded, and the two collided. Then, the palm of spiritual energy that was as big as a mountain quickly collapsed under the impact of the golden fist light. Of course, after shattering the palm of spiritual energy, the golden fist light also slowly dissipated, and the two of their attacks cancelled each other out. begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 1436. Facing Tian He-Feng's casual attack, Xiao Chen also casually threw out a punch. Their attacks were equally matched, and they cancelled each other out after colliding. After shattering Tian He-Feng's spiritual energy palm with a punch, Xiao Chen's dustless sword appeared in his hand with a thought. With the dustless sword in his hand, Xiao Chen's aura became incomparably sharp, as if his entire body had turned into a peerless treasure, bringing with it an incomparable sharpness. At the same time, the sword domain and the law of gravity were displayed at the same time, instantly enveloping Tian He-Feng. It's better to skip this meaningless probing. You know it's useless. Looking at Tian He-Feng, Xiao Chen spoke indifferently. After saying that, without waiting for Tian He-Feng's reply, Xiao Chen's feet moved, and he immediately attacked Tian He-Feng. This time, it was Xiao Chen's turn to attack. However, unlike Tian He-Feng, Xiao Chen did not have any intention of probing. He attacked with his full strength right from the start. The dustless sword flickered with a faint golden light, and he directly slashed out, instantly displaying the scorching sun sword technique. The flaming blade formed by the law of fire rapidly slashed towards Tian He-Feng. Wherever it passed, the space seemed to be incinerated. After breaking through to the Saint Realm, Xiao Chen's strength was clearly stronger than before, and the power of the scorching sun sword technique had also been forcefully raised to a new level. The higher the cultivation of the person with the same martial skill, the more powerful it would be when displayed. This was a very simple principle. Facing Xiao Chen's merciless sword, Tian He-Feng naturally would not be so foolish as to casually deal with it. He did not dare to be careless in the slightest. On Tian He-Feng's forehead, the mark that belonged to the Sky Clan slowly appeared. As the mark appeared, Tian He-Feng's aura skyrocketed once again. At this moment, Tian He-Feng was truly like a heavenly dipper saint. At the very least, his power definitely far surpassed Mo Juedai's. As the mark appeared, Tian He-Feng also slapped down with his palm. The power of this palm was completely incomparable to the previous one. His palm emitted a white light, and a palm print shot out, fiercely colliding with Xiao Chen's sword. Both of them went all out, and when the attack landed, the space began to show signs of collapse. However, this was only the beginning. After the attack landed, Xiao Chen pointed out, and the moist sword finger was instantly displayed. A cyan light flashed, and it shot towards Tian He-Feng like a mountain peak. Mo Juedai had died under Mo Xie's sword finger. However, Tian He-Feng was not Mo Juedai. Furthermore, he was not as careless as Mo Juedai. Facing Mo Xie's sword finger attack, Tian He-Feng extended both his hands. White light continuously gathered in front of him, forming a circular layer of protection like a mirror. The moist sword finger collided with the layer of white light. The white light rippled slightly, but it did not collapse in the end. Instead, it successfully blocked Xiao Chen's moist sword finger. Tianhe Peak blocked Xiao Chen's moist sword finger head-on without dodging. Tianhe Peak did not stop there. He clenched his fists slightly, and the layer of white light kept compressing until it formed a white ball of light about the size of a fist. Heavenly light kill. With a soft shout, Tian He-Feng's hands gently pushed, and the white ball of light flew out, arriving above Xiao Chen's head. Then, white light shot out like sharp jianyi. The number of white lights was extremely high, and each of them was powerful. Xiao Chen was completely shrouded by the white lights. For a moment, everyone only saw that the place where Xiao Chen was standing seemed to be raining arrows from the sky. The ground below was instantly torn apart by the countless white light arrows. Dust rose in all directions, and Xiao Chen's figure was instantly swallowed. Heavenly Light Kill was the innate ability of the Tian clan. It was very powerful and very difficult to dodge. After all, being enveloped by the light arrows of such a secret technique was simply unavoidable. The killing move had appeared, But after the dust slowly dissipated, Xiao Chen's figure once again appeared in front of everyone. However, at this time, Xiao Chen was not as miserable as everyone had imagined. It could even be said that he was completely unharmed. His entire body flickered with a dazzling golden light. Other than his clothes being slightly damaged, there were no obvious injuries on his body. The heavenly light kill was indeed difficult to dodge. Therefore, Xiao Chen simply gave up on dodging and chose to take it head-on. The tempered battle body was pushed to the limit. The countless light arrows bombarded Xiao Chen's body, but they did not have much effect. Moreover, even if they could occasionally break through Xiao Chen's physical defense, with the recovery ability of the tempered battle body, he would be able to recover in an instant. Therefore, Xiao Chen was completely fine after taking Tian He-Feng's heavenly light kill head-on. The golden light slowly dissipated, and Xiao Chen said with a faint smile on his face, "Not bad, you are much stronger than Emojuadai. This is interesting." Tian He-Feng's strength did indeed make Xiao Chen feel pressured. After all, he was a genuine heavenly dipper saint. It would be abnormal if he was not strong. As soon as he finished speaking, Xiao Chen continuously slashed out with his sword. Streaks of flaming swords attacked Tian He-Feng. He continuously used the scorching sun sword technique. From afar, the sky seemed to be enveloped by a sea of fire. Wherever the flaming swords passed, it could be said that they burned everything. Tian He-Feng once again put up a defense in front of him in response to Xiao Chen's continuous attack. White light gathered together, firmly protecting Tian He-Feng within. The flaming swords continuously slashed at the layer of white light. As the attacks continued, the white light rippled like the surface of water. It was an attack from a secret manual, and the power of each strike was not weak. It should be known that the Scorching Sun Sword technique was a mid-grade Saint-tier martial technique. One could imagine how powerful it was when used by Xiao Chen. Tian He-Feng's expression became increasingly ugly, and the white light faintly seemed to be reaching its limit. Tian He-Feng did not expect Xiao Chen's attacks to be so sharp. Under such a secret manual attack, Tian He-Feng simply could not find a way to counterattack. I don't believe that you can sustain such an attack for long." Tian He-Feng snorted coldly in his heart as he thought to himself. As a mid-grade Saint-tier martial technique, the Scorching Sun Sword technique naturally consumed a lot of spiritual energy. It was obviously impossible for Xiao Chen to continuously use the Scorching Sun Sword technique for long. Of course, this was also the case now. Xiao Chen had broken through to the Saint Realm. If it had been before, Xiao Chen would not have been able to do this. After breaking through to the Saint Realm, Xiao Chen's greatest improvement was actually the quality of his spiritual energy. Compared to when he was a half-step saint, the quality of Xiao Chen's spiritual energy had almost doubled. In fact, this was also the terrifying aspect of a Saint Realm expert. Their spiritual energy was as vast as the sea, and there was almost no such thing as a depleted spiritual energy. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1437. As Lin Yun continuously executed the Scorching Sun Sword technique, the numerous flaming swords in the sky were about to burn a hole in the horizon. Tianhe Peak, who was trying his best to defend, was indeed under a lot of pressure. If he was careless, his defense would collapse. Under such circumstances, Tianhe Peak's consumption was not small. However, Tianhe Peak was very clear that this time, it depended on who could hold on first. Even if Xiao Chen had a Saint Realm cultivation and a vast amount of spiritual energy, it was absolutely impossible for him to hold on for a long time by continuously using a mid-grade saint-level martial skill. Looking at the battle in the sky from afar, the surrounding Divine Clan warriors were already dumbfounded. Could a mid-grade saint-level martial skill be used like this? Many of them had such doubts in their hearts. It was simply too exaggerated. The flaming swords and scissors that filled the sky were like a meteor shower. Xiao Chen's attacks were swift and ferocious, and they looked frighteningly powerful. After about 100 breaths of time, the defenses of Tianhe Peak were completely destroyed. However, at the same time, Xiao Chen's flaming sword was also exhausted. Seeing that the two of them were evenly matched again, Xiao Chen had already appeared in front of Tianhe Peak and slashed out with his sword. Seeing this, Tianhe Peak reacted immediately. White light gathered on his hands and he punched out, fiercely colliding with the dustless sword. Tianhe Peak did not have any weapons. His weapons were his hands. Of course, there were many people in the Divine Clan who did not use weapons. This was also related to some of the Divine Clan's innate abilities. Just like now, Tianhe Peak's hands were surrounded by white light. This was the innate ability of the Divine Clan, called the White Fist. After using the White Fist, its power was not inferior to a saint weapon. It was as if he was wearing a pair of gloves on his head. In this way, Tianhe Peak naturally did not need any weapons. This was because no weapon could compare to his White Fist. After a head-on collision, the dustless sword was unable to cause any damage to Tianhe Peak's fist. At this time, Tianhe Peak's hands seemed to have turned into a pair of saint weapons. In close combat, Xiao Chen and Tianhe Peak fought fiercely. The two people's speed was extremely fast. Martial artists with lower cultivation could not catch the two people's movements at all. There were no fancy moves, just the simplest attacks, but every single one of them could be said to be absolutely fatal. Muffled bangs continued to resound in the sky. Spatial cracks that could be seen with the naked eye continued to appear. In the sky where the two of them were fighting, the space was already filled with cracks like a spiderweb. Many cultivators present were unable to take their eyes off such an intense battle. Exciting, it was indeed too exciting. The cultivation of these two individuals was merely at the initial stage of the Sage Realm. However, the battle strength they had displayed in this battle was clearly not weaker than that of the experts of the Sage Accomplished Realm. In fact, even those great seniors of the Sage Realm who had entered the Sage Realm might not dare to say that they had surpassed the strength of these two individuals. Was this the terror of a chosen on the saint rankings? Many people thought so. However, they had just broken through to the Sage Realm and already possessed the strength of the Central World's top expert. If they were allowed to continue to grow, perhaps in a few years, even a great senior of the Sage Realm might not be able to do anything to them. The battle became more and more intense. Neither of them relaxed at all. Such a high-intensity battle lasted for more than 6 hours. At this time, the space in the area where the two of them were had already begun to collapse. Endless void storms were rampant and wanton. However, both Xiao Chen and Tianhe Peak acted as if they had not heard of this. Perhaps the two of them had already forgotten everything after battling until now. They only wanted to defeat each other. To be honest, both Xiao Chen and Tianhe Peak were already very tired after 6 hours of intense battle. Moreover, Xiao Chen's tempered battle body had already reached its limit. That terrifying recovery ability had already broken through the limit. He would definitely not be able to use it again in a short period of time. Tianhe Peak had indeed forced Xiao Chen into a dead end. It had to be said that as a heavenly Dipper Saint, Tianhe Peak's strength was indeed very different from that of the Earth Emanation's saint below him. Moreover, this difference was very, very big. Of course, while Xiao Chen felt extremely pressured, so did Tianhe Peak. After a fierce battle with Xiao Chen, Tianhe Peak was also at his wits' end. His various methods were all blocked by Xiao Chen one by one. This made Tianhe Peak extremely shocked. After all, compared to Xiao Chen, he was a heavenly Dipper Saint, while Xiao Chen was merely a newcomer who had just stepped onto the saint rankings for less than 10 years. Thus, Xiao Chen could actually force him to such a state. Seeing that both of them were about to suffer, Xiao Chen suddenly slashed out with his sword and instantly executed the spiritual slash. The spiritual slash had always been Xiao Chen's killing move. It was impossible to guard against it, especially now that both of them had fought to the point of exhaustion. Their mental strength was also much weaker than before. Therefore, when Shao Chen executed the spiritual slash now, its power was definitely extremely terrifying. Tianhe Peak had thought that Shao Chen was going to use the Scorching Sun sword technique again, so he immediately put up a defense. However, this time Tianhe Peak miscalculated. Shao Chen did not use the Scorching Sun sword technique. Instead, it was an invisible sword blade that directly pierced between Tianhe Peak's eyebrows. Tianhe Peak then let out a blood-curdling scream as he hugged his head with both hands. He seemed to be in extreme pain. The spiritual slash had heavily injured Tianhe Peak with a single strike. Although it was impossible for the spiritual slash to directly injure a heavenly star saint like Tianhe Peak's soul, it was enough to make him lose his ability to fight for a moment. That was enough. As Tianhe Peak hugged his head in pain, Shao Chen had already pointed with his finger and executed the Moi sword finger. A cyan light suddenly shot out, heading straight for Tianhe Peak's heart. As long as Shao Chen could make Tianhe Peak lose consciousness, then the outcome would be decided in that one breath's time. As a matter of fact, when Shao Chen executed the Moi sword finger, Tianhe Peak regained his senses. However, it was clearly over now. Tianhe Peak had no ability to dodge the cyan light that was as fast as lightning. He had lost. He had lost. He had completely lost. Just when Tianhe Peak thought that he was going to die, the space in the sky was torn open. Then, an old man slowly walked out of it and gently extended his right hand. In an instant, a protective shield formed by white light appeared in front of Tianhe Peak, blocking Shao Chen's fatal attack. This old man had easily blocked Shao Chen's attack. Obviously, he was at least an expert in the lesser perfection of the quasi-saint realm. After resolving Tianhe Peak's crisis, the old man said indifferently, "The outcome has been decided. Let's end this battle here." Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1438. Shao Chen definitely wouldn't hold back against Tianhe Peak. First of all, Tianhe Peak wasn't weak, so Shao Chen naturally wouldn't hold back against him. Secondly, Tianhe Peak wanted to kill Shao Chen, so Shao Chen obviously wouldn't hold back if he had the chance. Since you want to kill me, I naturally won't hold back. After all, it's not the first time Shao Chen has killed a chosen on the holy rankings. However, it was a pity that an old man just had to come out and cause trouble when he was about to successfully kill Tianhe Peak. In the eyes of others, this old man might only be a quasi-saint great sovereign, but Shao Chen knew that this old man was definitely a half-step great saint expert. This was because Shao Chen had seen many experts at this level and was very familiar with their aura. They were far from being comparable to quasi-saint great sovereigns. As soon as he finished speaking, the old man seemed to have teleported and appeared beside Tianhe Peak in an instant. It was as if he had teleported. He was dressed in simple coarse hemp clothes. His hair was white and his figure was slightly hunched. However, no one present dared to underestimate this old man who looked like he had 1 foot in the grave. Therefore, this old man was one of the 9 main elders of the Heavenly Palace. The 9 main elders of the Heavenly Palace had the same status as the 3 hall masters of the Heavenly Yin and Solar Sect. Their strength was at the peak below the great sage. Elder Tianlin. A discerning person recognized the old man's identity and said in shock. Elder Tianlin naturally appeared here to protect Tianhe Peak. In fact, from the beginning, when Tianhe Peak went out to seek revenge on Shao Chen, although the Heavenly Palace didn't stop him, they had always sent people to protect him in secret. After all, Shao Chen couldn't be underestimated. This was something that the higher-ups of the Heavenly Palace had long known. Being able to kill Mo Juedai and annihilate the entire Mo family had already proved that Shao Chen was extraordinary. Today, He Feng came to seek revenge. Who knew what the outcome would be? It would be best if Tianhe Peak could kill Xiaochen, but what if Tianhe Peak couldn't defeat Xiaochen? Since they had already lost Emojuedai, the Heavenly Palace naturally couldn't lose Tianhe Peak, a chosen on the holy rankings. Therefore, Elder Tianlin had been secretly watching the battle until Tianhe Peak was completely defeated and his life was hanging by a thread. Elder Tianlin had no choice but to intervene. Victory or defeat didn't matter. After all, Xiaochen and Tianhe Peak had a fair battle. Tianhe Xiaochen could only blame himself for not being strong enough. But if Tianhe Peak was killed, that wouldn't be tolerated. Therefore, Elder Tianlin intervened to save Tianhe's life. The Heavenly Palace's Heavenly Palace. To be. The Heavenly Palace SAA on the holy rankings. T. Tud SS's killed STSS holy S. Tu Tites. T. Elder Tianlin spoke very calmly, as if he was stating a fact. Of course, this was indeed a fact. The Heavenly Palace could tolerate Xiaochen killing Emojuedai, and they had indeed tolerated it. However, if Xiaochen also killed Tianhe Peak, the Heavenly Palace would probably have no one left. Even if they used a quasi-saint great sovereign to exchange his life for Xiaochen's life, the Heavenly Palace would probably take action. Of course, the Heavenly Palace's actions were clearly against the rules. However, if two chosen on the holy rankings died consecutively at Xiaochen's hands, the Heavenly Palace probably wouldn't care about the rules anymore. As Elder Tianlin's voice fell, the light of the holy rankings appeared in the sky. Xiaochen had also successfully jumped from the original 45th place to the 36th place, becoming one of the 36 Heavenly Dipper Saints. As for Tianhe Peak, he had fallen by 1 place. Although it was only 1 place, it also meant that Tianhe Peak had already fallen out of the Heavenly Dipper Saint's position. The results of the holy rankings were already out. Tianhe Peak's face was gloomy. Falling out of the Heavenly Dipper Saint's position was indeed a huge blow to Tianhe Peak. After glancing at the light screen in the sky, Xiaochen immediately said, "In that case, forget it. In any case, there's nothing I can do with an expert like Elder Tianlin around." Actually, not killing Tianhe Peak didn't affect Xiaochen much. Moreover, with Elder Tianlin around, Xiaochen really couldn't do anything to Tianhe Peak. Of course, the most important thing was that Xiaochen didn't want to fall out with the Heavenly Palace too much. After all, Tianyue was still cultivating in the Heavenly Palace, and Xiaochen also planned to make a trip to the Heavenly Palace. As expected, Xiaochen did not give Elder Tianlin a chance to speak after he gave up on killing Tianhe Peak. He paused for a moment before he continued. He paused for a moment and said, "However, there's something I hope you can agree to. I'll make a trip to the Heavenly Palace. After all, my wife is currently cultivating in the Heavenly Palace." Going to the Heavenly Palace? Elder Tianlin didn't hesitate to nod and agree. It's a small matter. Anytime. The Heavenly Palace naturally knew about the relationship between Xiaochen and Tianyue. In fact, given the arrogant character of the Sky Tribe, almost everyone in the Heavenly Palace disagreed with the relationship between Tianyue and Xiaochen. There were even a few elders with more extreme characters who had once forced Tianyue to forget Xiaochen and tear up her marriage with Xiaochen. In their opinion, how could a Sky Tribe marry a human? Moreover, Tianyue was so talented and was already a chosen on the holy rankings. How could she marry a human like Xiaochen? However, Tianyue's attitude was very firm in the face of these people. No matter what, she wouldn't agree to break off the marriage. Moreover, she had Tianmushi behind her. For some reason, Tianmushi doted on Tianyue. No matter what happened, Tianmushi would stand up for Tianyue. Given Tianmushi's status in the Heavenly Palace, she had already spoken. As such, even the elders of the main seats could do nothing about it. With Tianmushi's protection, Tianyue's days in the Heavenly Palace were quite comfortable. Of course, Xiaochen was naturally unaware of all this. After receiving Elder Tianlin's approval, Xiao Chen smiled faintly. In that case, why don't I return to the heavenly palace with Elder? Elder Tianlin originally thought that Xiao Chen would only return after a few days. He didn't expect that Xiao Chen would actually want to return with him. This somewhat exceeded Elder Tianlin's expectations. Elder Tianlin was slightly taken aback, but he quickly smiled and said, "Haha, you're quite bold. Since you want to return to the heavenly palace with this old man, let's go. However, I have to tell you that there are many people in the heavenly palace who don't like you. You should be mentally prepared. The experts in the heavenly palace won't directly attack me, right?" Xiao Chen smiled and said, "Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 1439. There were many people in the heavenly palace who were unhappy with Xiao Chen. Other than the matter with Tianyu, there was also the reason why Xiao Chen had killed Mo Juedai. After all, Mo Juedai was the holy son of the heavenly palace on the saint ranking. His prestige in the heavenly palace was not low. Since he had died at the hands of Xiao Chen, many disciples naturally hated Xiao Chen. However, Xiao Chen did not care about it, because eyes could not kill. So what if they were unhappy with him? Could it be that they could kill him with just their eyes? That was obviously impossible. Moreover, Xiao Chen had only gone to the heavenly palace to see Tianyu. As for other things, they were not important to Xiao Chen. Of course, as long as the older generation of the heavenly palace did not make a move, it would be fine. Elder Tianlin smiled faintly when he heard Xiao Chen's words. "Haha, you little brat. Don't worry. My sky palace will not go so far as to bully the weak. Although many of those old fellows do not like you, they will definitely not personally attack you. The older generation of experts would definitely not attack Xiao Chen. Firstly, it would be very unsightly. Secondly, Xiao Chen was the holy son of the saint ranking. Whoever killed him would have to pay with their life. His impression of Xiao Chen was not bad. Originally, with the relationship between the heavenly palace and Xiao Chen, although the two sides could not be considered enemies, there was definitely no intersection. However, after a simple conversation with Xiao Chen, Elder Tianlin had a good impression of Xiao Chen. He even felt that this human brat was a little interesting. After a few simple words, Xiao Chen, Elder Tianlin, and Tianhe Peak rushed towards the heavenly palace. Even after the three of them left, the many Tian clan martial artists present still had not recovered from their shock. Of course, Xiao Chen naturally did not care about this. After breaking through to the saint stage, Xiao Chen could also tear through the void and travel in the void. As a result, his speed was naturally much faster than flying in the air. However, along the way, Tianhe Peak did not say a word. Moreover, his eyes were filled with coldness when he looked at Xiao Chen. Obviously, this fellow was definitely very unhappy in his heart. Unfortunately, Xiao Chen did not care about Tianhe Peak's cold gaze at all. "I like it when you are unhappy with me but unable to kill me." Tianhe Peak, who was already pissed off, became even angrier when he saw how fearless Xiao Chen was. The flames of fury in his eyes burned even brighter. Sensing the anger in Tianhe Peak's eyes, Xiao said, "What? Do you still want to fight with me? I don't recommend keeping you company, but next time, don't ask your parents to save you. Don't worry, I won't kill you either." Xiao Chen sneered. Tianhe Peak clenched his fists tightly when he heard that. To be honest, although Elder Tianlin had saved Tianhe Peak's life this time, it had also dealt a huge blow to Tianhe Peak's self-esteem. Especially now, Xiao Chen would still occasionally tease Tianhe Peak about this matter. This made Tianhe Peak feel extremely humiliated. As a saint on the saint rankings and one of the 36 celestial stars, Tianhe Peak had already been kicked out of the celestial star saint rankings. However, no matter what, the fact that Tianhe Peak was able to reach this stage was proof of its strength and talent. With such talent, Tianhe Peak's pride was definitely very strong. However, the matter this time had dealt a great blow to Tianhe Peak's pride. His strength was inferior to Xiao Qin's, and even his verbal skills were no match for Xiao Qin's. In the end, Tianhe Peak simply ignored Xiao Qin and didn't even look at Xiao Qin. They didn't encounter any accidents along the way. Under Elder Tianlin's lead, Xiao Qin arrived at the Heavenly Palace after only 1 day. As soon as they arrived at the Heavenly Palace, Tianhe Peak immediately left. He had no intention of paying attention to Xiao Qin. Tianhe Peak stepped out of the teleportation array and left first. At this time, a Heavenly Palace elder came up to Tianlin and cupped his hands in greeting. However, when he saw Xiao Qin, he was clearly stunned. He then looked at Tianlin with a puzzled expression. "Elder, this Xiao Qin." Xiao Qin had killed Mo Juedai and defeated Tianhe Peak. If Elder Tianlin hadn't intervened, Tianhe Peak would have been dead. But now, Xiao Qin actually dared to take the initiative to come to the Heavenly Palace, and even came with Elder Tianlin. What was going on? In response to the elder's puzzlement, Tianlin just smiled and said, "I can't help it. This old man brought Xiao Qin here." Most of the time, Tianlin gave people the impression that he was a harmless old man. He was very peaceful, just like now. Even when facing an ordinary Heavenly Palace elder, Tianlin still had a pleasant expression on his face. As soon as he finished speaking, Tianlin took the initiative to lead Xiao Qin into the Heavenly Palace. The entire sky was built above the clouds, so it was indeed a heavenly palace. Furthermore, all the buildings in the Heavenly Palace were pure white, giving off an ethereal feeling. Other problems aside, Xiao Qin really liked the Heavenly Palace. At the very least, the environment was very good. After personally leading Xiao Qin to Tianyue's cave abode, Elder Tianlin smiled and said, "This is Tianyue's cave abode. This old man has already brought you into the Heavenly Palace. As for the trouble ahead, it's none of my business. But with your abilities, kid, there shouldn't be any problems. Alright, now that you've reunited as husband and wife, this old man won't cause any more trouble." With a gentle smile on his face, Xiao Qin and Elder Tianlin talked about some topics along the way. Of course, they were all trivial matters. Xiao Qin had a good impression of Elder Tianlin. After all, the way he spoke and acted, he seemed very sincere, and he was very amiable when leading people. After cupping his hands and bowing to Elder Tianlin, Xiao Qin replied, "Thank you very much, Senior. I will personally pay you a visit another day." "Haha, that won't be necessary. You should deal with your own troubles first. You were the one who wanted to come to the Heavenly Palace, so you will have to deal with the rest. But this old man has one more thing to say. If possible, don't kill. Otherwise, it won't do you any good," Elder Tianlin said with a smile. After saying that, Elder Tianlin left immediately. At the same time, the door of the cave abode opened. Tianyue strode out and grumbled in dissatisfaction. "Who is it?" Tianyue had come out to check after sensing the commotion outside the door. However, just as she was about to speak, she saw Xiao Qin outside the door. Her voice came to an abrupt halt. Xiao Qin was also looking at Tianyue with a smile on his face as the corners of his mouth curved into a smile. "Why? Aren't you happy to see your husband? To think that I came all the way to the Heavenly Palace to look for you. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 1440. She didn't expect Xiao Qin to appear here. Hearing this, Tianyue was stunned for a moment before she recovered and rushed into Xiao Qin's arms. It had been almost a year since she came to the Heavenly Palace. Although she had Tianmushi's care in the Heavenly Palace, Tianyu's life was actually very good. Whether it was cultivation or other things, the Heavenly Palace didn't mistreat Tianyu. But she was still a person. Every time Tianyu was free, she couldn't help but think of Xiao Qin. Especially after learning that Xiao Qin had come to the territory of the Tian clan, Tian Yu couldn't help but want to take the initiative to look for Xiao Chen's whereabouts many times, but she was stopped by Tian Mushi in the end. According to Tian Mushi, Xiao Chen killed Mo Juedai, so his relationship with the Heavenly Palace was very subtle. If Tian Yu took the initiative to look for Xiao Chen at this time, not only would it not be beneficial, it might also bring some unnecessary trouble to Xiao Chen. The best result was to wait for Xiao Chen to take the initiative to come to the Heavenly Palace to look for her. If Xiao Chen wanted to, he would definitely come back to the Heavenly Palace. Xiao Chen taking the initiative to come to the Heavenly Palace and Tian Yu looking for Xiao Chen were two completely different concepts. At least, if Xiao Chen took the initiative to come to the Heavenly Palace, then the experts of the older generation of the Heavenly Palace would no longer attack Xiao Chen. After all, the Heavenly Palace was the only great saint sect of the Tian clan. They couldn't afford to lose face. Just as Tian Mushi thought, Xiao Chen really came. Hugging Xiao Chen tightly, Tian Yu smiled happily, but her eyes were a little moist. "That," I said, "do you want to strangle me?" In her excitement, Tian Yu didn't care about her strength. Of course, with Tian Yu's strength, it was indeed impossible to hurt Xiao Chen. After teasing Tian Yu, the two of them entered the cave. They had been separated for almost 2 years. Now that they had met again, both Xiao Chen and Tian Yu were extremely happy. Naturally, they had endless things to talk about. Xiao Chen and his wife were whispering in the cave mansion. Outside, news about Xiao Chen quickly spread. Many disciples knew that Xiao Chen had come to the Heavenly Palace. After all, Xiao Chen had no intention of hiding his identity along the way, and he was personally brought in by Elder Tianlin. Therefore, many disciples quickly learned that Xiao Chen was in the Heavenly Palace. Just as Elder Tianlin had said, most of the disciples in the Heavenly Palace were unhappy with Xiao Chen. Many of them were cursing Xiao Chen. Some said that Xiao Chen was bold, some said that Xiao Chen was reckless, some said that they wanted to teach Xiao Chen a lesson, and some even said that they wanted to kill Xiao Chen to avenge their senior brother Mo Juedai. In short, after hearing that Xiao Chen had dared to take the initiative to come to the Heavenly Palace, many disciples of the Heavenly Palace were agitated. Perhaps in their opinion, Xiao Chen was really reckless. After killing their chosen on the saint ranking, he actually dared to take the initiative to come to the Heavenly Palace. He was simply courting death. Compared to the angry curses of these ordinary disciples, chosen on the saint ranking like Tian Mushi and Tian Fun were very calm. They didn't do anything special because of Xiao Chen's arrival. Of course, they also knew that Xiao Chen's purpose in coming to the Heavenly Palace was only for Tian Yu. In a bamboo forest, Tian Mushi was sitting cross-legged in her cave dwelling. Naturally, she also knew that Xiao Chen had come to the Heavenly Palace. At this moment, Tian Mushi's eyes flashed with a faint smile. Elder Tianlin is still the same. It seems that those old fellows will quarrel again this time. However, this Xiao Chen is not bad. He actually defeated Tian Hifeng. It's only been a few years since he entered the saint ranking, but he's already ranked among the 36 Heavenly Dipper Saints. Interesting. Knowing that Xiao Chen was brought to the Heavenly Palace by Elder Tianlin, Tian Mushi seemed to have expected that those old fellows would quarrel again. However, Elder Tianlin's character was like this. In his heart, as long as it didn't involve the foundation of the Heavenly Palace, he would do everything according to his own heart. If he liked someone, even if that person was an enemy of the Heavenly Palace, Elder Tianlin would still befriend that person. This wasn't the first time Elder Tianlin had done something like this. The previous few times, he had angered the other elders. It was probably the same this time. Tian Mushi wasn't surprised by Elder Tianlin's actions. He was an old urchin. He was already so old, but he still did things according to his instincts. On the contrary, Tian Mushi became a little interested in Xiao Chen. She had seen Xiao Chen before at the Human Race Hero Assembly. However, at that time, Xiao Chen had only just stepped onto the saint ranking. Although he was very famous in the human race, He was only SOSO in the eyes of someone like Tianmushi, who was ranked in the top 3. However, Tianmushi hadn't expected that in just 2 years, Xiao Chen would actually become one of the 36 Heavenly Dipper Saints. This speed of improvement shocked Tianmushi. Somehow, Tianmushi seemed to understand why Long Yang valued Xiao Chen so much. Perhaps Xiao Chen was really someone who could stand shoulder to shoulder with them. Perhaps in the future, Tianmushi, Long Yang and the other top 3 saints on the saint ranking would have another formidable opponent. But that's good too. It's indeed a little boring to always face the same old face. It would be interesting if Xiao Chen could really reach this level, Tianmushi murmured with a faint smile. Xiao Chen might be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with them, but he still had a long way to go. He shouldn't think that after becoming a Heavenly Dipper Saint, he would be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with the top 3 saints. The gap was still very large. While Tianmushi was mumbling to herself, the Sky Palace's upper echelons were gathered in the main hall of the Sky Palace, just as Tianmushi had expected. The 9 elders of the Sky Palace were all present. One of the 3 palace masters of the Sky Palace had also come. 4 of the elders of the Sky Palace glared furiously at Elder Tianlin. Tianlin, are you crazy? Xiao Chen killed Emojuedai. It's fine if the Heavenly Palace doesn't find trouble with him, but you actually brought him to the Heavenly Palace. Do you think the Heavenly Palace hasn't lost enough face? Tianlin, you have indeed gone overboard. Xiao Chen took the initiative to come to our Sky Palace. In the eyes of outsiders, wouldn't he be bullying our Sky Palace? The 4 elders of the Sky Palace were very dissatisfied with Elder Tianlin's actions. However, Elder Tianlin didn't seem to mind their reprimanding. Didn't I say before that matters between the saints on the saint ranking will naturally be resolved by the saints themselves? Furthermore, how can the dignity of our Sky Palace be represented by a mere Emojuedai? It would be more appropriate to say these words when Xiao Chen defeats that little girl, Tianmushi. Begging for a monthly vote, begging for a recommendation. Chapter 1441. Facing the accusations of the other 4 elders, Tianlin didn't take them seriously at all. In his opinion, Xiao Chen's matter was just a small matter. Although Emojuedai was a saint on the saint ranking of the Heavenly Palace and was extremely important to the Heavenly Palace, Missouri Juedai wasn't enough to represent the Heavenly Palace. Among the younger generation of the Heavenly Palace, only Tianmushi could truly represent the Heavenly Palace. If Xiao Chen had killed Tianmushi instead of Emojuedai, the Heavenly Palace would have gone crazy long ago. Why would they care about rules and face? They would definitely kill you. Unfortunately, Xiao Chen didn't kill Tianmushi. Of course, with Xiao Chen's current strength, it was impossible for him to pose any threat to Tianmushi. Facing Tianlin's indifferent attitude, the 4 elders who were already in a bad mood became even angrier. In the eyes of Elder Tianlin, these 4 were stubborn old men who didn't know how to be flexible at all. All they thought about was the dignity of the Sky Clan, the noble bloodline of the Sky Clan, and such boring things. They were the same in the matter of Tianyu, insisting that Tianyu tear up the marriage with Xiao Chen. In the end, if Tianmushi hadn't stepped in, these 4 old fellows would have probably forced Tianyu to death. It was the same now. Emojuedai was already dead. Moreover, hadn't they already agreed on this before? Now, these 4 old fellows had come again. They were simply like stones in a latrine, smelly and hard. Of course, these 4 were also loyal and devoted to the Heavenly Palace. Their thoughts were also for the good of the Heavenly Palace, but their motives were different. In Tianlin's opinion, how could a huge Heavenly Palace's foundation be damaged because of Emojuedai's death? However, in the eyes of these 4, Xiao Chen's killing of Emojuedai was a provocation to the Heavenly Palace's dignity. They didn't take action before because the Central World also had the rules of the Central World, so they endured it. But now, Shao Chun actually dared to take the initiative to come to the heavenly palace. In their eyes, this was a provocation, a naked provocation. A few old monsters who had lived for God knows how many years were arguing in full swing in the main hall. If other people were present at this time, they would definitely be shocked. How were these the 9 main elders of the heavenly palace revered by countless people in the outside world? They were simply a group of street thugs. In the end, all kinds of unpleasant insults were thrown out. In response, the palace master of the heavenly palace, who was sitting on the main seat, could not bear it any longer. He shouted in a low voice, "Shut up." His voice wasn't loud, but it seemed to be able to penetrate one's soul. As the palace master spoke, Tianlin and the 4 elders shut their mouths. The 3 palace masters of the heavenly palace were the great sage, and the one sitting here was called the 3rd palace master by outsiders. He had a bad temper, so even Tianlin and the others didn't dare to be presumptuous. The 3rd palace master stopped the quarrel with one sentence. At this time, the 3rd palace master said indifferently, "All right, the matter has come to an end, so there's no need to quarrel anymore. Shao Chun killed Emojuadai. That's the result of a fair battle between the 2 of them. No matter whether Shao Chun has come to the heavenly palace or not, you can't do anything to him. Bullying the weak is a disgrace to the heavenly palace, do you understand? Moreover, Tianlin is right. How can our heavenly palace lose face because of Emojuadai alone? Emojuadai can't represent the entire heavenly palace." After the 3rd palace master's words, the whole matter was settled. Emojuadai's death had come to an end. At the very least, the experts of the older generation couldn't do anything to Shao Chun. Otherwise, not only would they offend the heavenly Yin and Taiyang sect, but they would also become a joke to the world. At that time, what would the world say? Could it be that the heavenly palace didn't have anyone who could deal with Shao Chun? They actually wanted the experts of the older generation to personally take action. That would truly be disgracing the heavenly palace. At this point, the 3rd palace master's gaze swept across the 4 elders who were arguing incessantly. Seeing this, the 4 of them nodded slightly to express their agreement. Seeing this, the 3rd palace master's expression became a little better. However, he immediately turned his gaze to Tianlin and continued. "However, Tianlin, I know that those little fellows below definitely won't be able to take this lying down. They will definitely go back and find trouble with Shao Chun. Help me tell Mu Shi that I don't care what she thinks, but sometimes, as the first holy son of the heavenly clan, I still have to take action when it's time. We can't let Shao Chun defeat all the younger generation of the heavenly palace, right?" Without waiting for Tianlin's reply, the 3rd palace master's figure directly disappeared from the spot. He didn't want the experts of the older generation to take action because it would be even more embarrassing. However, he also couldn't let Shao Chun trample all the younger generation of the heavenly palace under his feet. Therefore, the 3rd palace master asked Tianlin to pass a message to Tianmushi. Originally, with Tianmushi's character, she definitely wouldn't care about these things. However, now that the 3rd palace master had given the order, Tianmushi would definitely take action when necessary. Shao Chun didn't know what was going on in the Great Hall. As the saying goes, absence makes the heart grow fonder. After being separated for almost 2 years, Shao Chun wasn't in the mood to care about the outside world. In addition, Shao Chun had finally become one of the 36 Heavenly Dipper holy sons. The burden on his shoulders was much lighter. Therefore, he wouldn't care about other things. After spending the night with Tianmushi, the 2 of them had just woken up and came to the courtyard the next morning when they heard waves of fluctuations coming from outside Tian Yu's cave dwelling. Someone was bombarding the cave dwelling's barrier. Seeing this, Tian Yu looked at Shao Chun. The 2 of them smiled at each other. Needless to say, they knew what was going on. It must be the disciples of the Heavenly Palace, who knew that Shao Chun had come to the Heavenly Palace. Therefore, they specially came to look for trouble. Looking at Shao Chen, Tianyu smiled mischievously and said, "Husband, you really have trouble everywhere you go." Hearing this, Shao Chen smiled and said, "Lice don't bite when there are many of them. Anyway, there's a lot of trouble. Who cares? I'll go out and take a look." Before coming to the heavenly palace, Shao Chen had already guessed all of this. However, in order to see Tianyu, Shao Chen still came. Since he was here, there was naturally no point in hiding. Moreover, if he didn't solve these troubles, how could Shao Chen stay with Tianyu in the following days? After all, Shao Chen couldn't stay in the heavenly palace for a long time. Since he didn't have much time, Shao Chen naturally wanted to use his time in meaningful places. In this way, if he was entangled with troubles all day long, how could he have time to do other things? Therefore, it was obviously impossible to escape. In that case, it was better to solve it once and for all. Shao Chen strode out of the cave abode. As soon as he stepped out of the cave abode, he saw that many disciples of the heavenly palace had gathered outside the cave abode. When they saw Shao Chen appear, all the disciples began to curse him. The scene was indeed very exciting. Please collect, please vote, please recommend. Chapter 1442. Outside the cave, many disciples of the heavenly palace had gathered. When they saw Shao Chen walk out of the cave, many of them began to curse. "Shao Chen, do you really think there's no one left in our heavenly palace? How dare you come to our heavenly palace after killing senior brother Mo Juedai?" "That's right, Shao Chen. This isn't your human clan's heavenly yin-yang sect. You have to give us an explanation for killing senior brother Mo Juedai." Everyone began to curse. Shao Chen sneered inwardly. The disciples standing in front of him were almost all ordinary disciples of the heavenly palace. The strongest were only those quasi-saint. As for the saint ranking, there wasn't a single one. Even the saint ranking of the heavenly palace didn't appear. What could these quasi-saints do to him with a group of ordinary disciples? A sneer appeared at the corner of Shao Chen's mouth as he swept his gaze across these disciples. Then, an aura suddenly soared into the sky from Shao Chen's body, and a terrifying pressure swept out in all directions. Now that he had broken through to the saint realm, Shao Chen's pressure wasn't something these ordinary disciples could resist. Not to mention them, even ordinary saints would feel unprecedented pressure in front of Shao Chen. The pressure swept out in all directions, and under the pressure of Shao Chen's aura, the disciples who were still cursing immediately shut their mouths. It was finally quiet. At this moment, Shao Chen said indifferently, "You all want to kill me for revenge? Alright, today, I, Shao Chen, will set up an arena here. Anyone can come up. If you want to kill me, then come." Many of these disciples had followed in a daze. To put it bluntly, someone was leading the tempo. After all, the matter of Shao Chen killing Mo Juedai had already been decided by the upper echelons of the heavenly palace. What else could these disciples say? Moreover, Shao Chen didn't believe that all the disciples present were related to Mo Juedai. Obviously, it was impossible. It was obvious that someone was leading the way. Those disciples who had a good relationship with Mo Juedai had deliberately angered everyone in order to suppress Shao Chen with numbers. With so many people coming together, Shao Chen would have to admit defeat no matter what. However, it was a pity that Shao Chen didn't buy it. He deliberately stirred up trouble. Did he think that by inciting so many disciples to come here, he would be able to make him give in? That was impossible. Hearing Shao Chen's words, the disciples present all looked at each other. To be honest, none of them had the courage to step forward and fight Shao Chen. After all, Shao Chen's battle achievements were not fabricated out of thin air. How could ordinary disciples like them be a match for a saint on the saint rankings, and a saint ranked 36th on the saint rankings at that? The people who were cheering earlier were all mute now. No one dared to reply to Shao Chen, let alone step forward. There were tens of thousands of heavenly palace disciples present, but no one dared to step forward. Everyone looked at each other. Seeing this, Xiao Chen's expression didn't change as he said indifferently, "What's wrong? No one dares to step forward? Weren't you all cheering happily just now?" Xiao Chen didn't really want to do anything to these disciples. He just wanted to solve the problem. Since he had already suppressed these disciples, Xiao Chen naturally didn't want to go overboard. After all, this was the heavenly palace. After pausing for a moment, Xiao Chen continued when he saw that none of the disciples spoke. "Me killing Mo Juedai was a fair battle. If any of you feel unconvinced, you can come and challenge me. I can accept the challenge at any time. Cursing like a shrew like this will only cause your heavenly palace to lose face." Most of these disciples were here to join in the fun. They never thought of fighting Xiao Chen. To put it bluntly, since the higher-ups of the heavenly palace had already made a decision, it was even less of a problem for them. After hearing Xiao Chen's words, some disciples turned around and left. With someone taking the lead, many disciples quickly dispersed. They came here to discuss Xiao Chen, but now they were embarrassed by Xiao Chen's words. Yes, there were so many heavenly palace disciples present, but no one dared to fight Xiao Chen. If this wasn't embarrassing, then what was? How could they still have the face to continue gathering here? Seeing these disciples gradually disperse, Xiao Chen didn't feel surprised. After all, the chosen on the saint ranking of the heavenly palace didn't make a move. Although there were many ordinary disciples, what could they do? After dismissing the crowd with a few words, Xiao Chen turned around and returned to the cave. Next, it would depend on whether the chosen on the saint ranking of the heavenly palace would make a move. After all, they were the most troublesome. However, Xiao Chen obviously didn't know that the chosen on the saint ranking of the heavenly palace had no intention of making a move. With Tianmushi's character, she didn't want to care about these things, and Tianfun was even more so. If the two of them didn't take the lead, and Tianhe Peak was defeated by Xiao Chen, naturally no one would come to find trouble with Xiao Chen. They thought that there would be a lot of trouble in the heavenly palace, but who would have thought that it would be resolved so easily? In the next few days, Xiao Chen stayed in the heavenly palace and accompanied Tianyu. The two of them didn't cultivate. After all, it was rare for them to be together. Xiao Chen and Tianyu didn't want to waste time on cultivation, so they kept each other company. After all, Xiao Chen couldn't stay for too long. No one came to find trouble with Xiao Chen, and Xiao Chen was naturally happy to be free. 3 days passed in a row, and on this day, Tianmushi took the initiative to visit Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen didn't expect Tianmushi's arrival. After all, Tianmushi had helped Xianyuan Baijian last time, and the two of them didn't have a good relationship. However, Xiao Chen also learned from Tianyu that Tianmushi had taken care of him these days. As a result, Xiao Chen didn't have any intention of holding a grudge against Tianmushi. In the backyard, the three of them sat together. Tianyu and Tianmushi were very familiar with each other, but Xiao Chen was very indifferent and didn't speak much. After chatting with Tianyu for a while, Tianmushi turned to look at Xiao Chen and smiled faintly. "What, are you still holding a grudge against me because of what happened last time? I say, aren't you a little too narrow-minded?" "No, I'm not that narrow-minded. I just don't know what to say," Xiao Chen replied indifferently. He didn't hold a grudge against Tianmushi, but it was also impossible for him to hold a grudge against her. Tianmushi didn't care about Xiao Chen's attitude, and the smile on her face didn't fade. "All right, I've come to find you this time because I have something to discuss with you. If you agree, then the grudge between you and the heavenly palace will be written off. How about it? I won't do anything to you. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 1443. Originally, the Heavenly Palace had wanted Tianmushi to take action and dampen Xiao Chen's spirit. Unfortunately, Tianmushi was not interested at all. However, a few days ago, there was news of a secret realm appearing at the border between the Heavenly Palace and the Ghost Palace. When the news came out, both clans sent experts to investigate. In the end, they came to the conclusion that the secret realm was not simple at all. It was a new secret realm that had appeared, and it was very powerful. As a result, both the Heavenly Palace and Ghost Palace naturally wanted to take it for themselves. If they wanted to compete for this newly emerged secret realm, they would definitely have to fight. However, if the matter was blown out of proportion, it was obviously not a situation that the two clans were willing to see. Therefore, after a discussion between the great saint emperors of the two clans, they decided to send 3 holy sons of the saint rankings to fight. The ownership of this secret realm would be determined based on the final outcome. Using the chosen of the saint rankings to decide the ownership of the secret realm was a very good method. Firstly, it could avoid an all-out war, and secondly, it was persuasive enough. After all, the status of a chosen of the saint rankings was very high in any clan. What Tian Mushi wanted Xiao Chun to do was very simple. She wanted him to represent the Heavenly Palace. As long as he won one battle, the matter between the Heavenly Palace and Xiao Chun would be resolved. She explained the matter to Xiao Chun in a simple manner. When he heard that, Xiao Chun did not immediately agree. Instead, he looked at Tian Mushi suspiciously and asked, "Your Heavenly Palace has so many chosen of the saint rankings? Why can't it be me?" The Heavenly Palace was very powerful, and there were many chosen of the saint rankings. There was no reason for an outsider like him to interfere. Tian Mushi smiled and did not hide anything. "You defeated Tian Hifeng. Tian Hifeng is the 3rd chosen of my Heavenly Palace. You're stronger than him, so your chances of winning will naturally be higher than his. Besides, as I said just now, this is a favor. That is to say, this is free. If you win, my Heavenly Palace will not give you anything, and that secret realm will still belong to my Heavenly Palace. Don't you think it's stupid not to use free labor? To put it bluntly, it would be a waste not to use Xiao Chun. In any case, the Heavenly Palace did not need to pay any price, and Xiao Chun was indeed stronger than Tianhe Peak. Letting Xiao Chun fight was obviously better than letting Tianhe Peak fight. In that case, why not choose Xiao Chun? In any case, there was no loss to the Heavenly Palace. Tian Mushi was rather straightforward. In short, her Heavenly Palace was clearly using him, and there was no benefit to be gained from it. You do the work, and my Heavenly Palace gets the benefits. Hearing this, Xiao Chun smiled helplessly. Tian Mushi was indeed a weirdo. She asked for help, but she didn't know how to be tactful. Didn't she know that saying this would really hurt her? Xiao Chun looked helplessly at Tian Mushi, but Tian Mushi was still looking at him with a smile, as if she wasn't afraid that Xiao Chun would refuse at all. The two of them looked at each other for a while, and in the end, it was Xiao Chun who spoke first. "You haven't finished speaking, right? This should only be one of the reasons. What else?" There were definitely more reasons for insisting that Xiao Chun fight. Moreover, from Tian Mushi's appearance, she didn't plan on giving Xiao Chun a chance to refuse this time. Hearing Xiao Chun's words, Tian Mushi smiled. "Not bad, very smart. There is indeed another reason. If you don't fight, my Heavenly Palace doesn't have absolute confidence in defeating the Ghost race. Although none of the chosen on the saint ranking of the Ghost clan could contend against Tian Mushi, Tian Fun and Tian Hifeng were not confident that they could defeat their opponents. The top 3 chosen of the celestial race were ranked like this. Tian Mushi was ranked 2nd on the saint rankings, Tian Fun was ranked 7th, and Tianhe Peak was currently ranked 37th. This was the ranking of the top 3 chosen of the celestial race. On the Ghost race's side, the first chosen of the Ghost race was ranked 5th, while the third chosen was ranked 35th. In this way, the situation was very clear. In the competition for the first Holy Sun, Tian Mushi would definitely win. This was because even though there was only a difference of 2 ranks between the second and the fourth, the gap was extraordinarily large. Thus, Tianmushi could be said to be the Sherwin version. However, apart from Tianmushi, Tianfun and Tianhe Peak were ranked lower than the other two chosen of the ghost race. Moreover, Tianfun had once fought the second chosen of the ghost race and lost in the end. Thus, Tianfun's chances of victory were very, very low. It didn't exceed 20%. Once Tianfun lost, the key to victory would fall on the third chosen of both sides. Unfortunately, it was very difficult for Tianhe Peak to defeat the third chosen of the ghost race with its strength. Thus, compared to Tianhe Peak, Xiao Chen's chances of victory were clearly higher. As if she was certain that Xiao Chen wouldn't be able to refuse, Tianmushi didn't hide anything and told him the truth. Tianmushi did not hide anything from Xiao Chen about the free labor and the blatant exploitation of him. If Xiao Chen were to fight, it would be obvious that he wouldn't gain anything in the end. At most, his enmity with the Heavenly Palace would be written off. After hearing Tianmushi's explanation, Xiao Chen smiled bitterly. Can I refuse? To put it bluntly, this was working for nothing. Xiao Chen naturally didn't want to agree. However, Tianmushi smiled and said, "Sure, as long as you think you can defeat me." In any case, she didn't plan on giving Xiao Chen a chance to refuse. If he didn't agree, Tianmushi would have no choice but to fight. Hearing Tianmushi's words, Xiao Chen had already expected such an outcome. He glanced at Tianyu and saw the worried look on the little girl's face. Xiao Chen smiled bitterly in his heart. Forget it. I'll just treat it as repaying this woman for taking care of Tianyu. With that thought, Xiao Chen looked at Tianmushi and said, "All right, I agree. I knew it. Then I'll go tell the palace master and the others," said Tianmushi with a smile. Tell the palace master? Hearing this, Xiao Chen was taken aback, and then he said in disbelief, You didn't do this on your own, did you? Doesn't your Heavenly Palace's palace master know? He had always thought that the higher-ups of the Heavenly Palace wanted him to fight, but now it seemed that this wasn't the case. It was completely Tianmushi's own idea. Tianmushi smiled and stood up. I had no choice. The palace master wanted me to teach you a lesson, but I didn't want to fight you. Now that something like this happened, if you can help the Heavenly Palace win this battle, I'm sure the palace master won't make things difficult for you. It was completely Tianmushi's own idea. Hearing this, Xiao Chen was completely defeated. It was no wonder. No matter how shameless the higher-ups of the Heavenly Palace were, they wouldn't let him fight on behalf of the Heavenly Palace. Only Tianmushi could come up with such a ridiculous idea. Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me. Chapter 1444. This was entirely Tianmushi's idea. Xiao Chen didn't know what to say when he heard that. But what could he say now that things had gotten to this point? He could only look at Tianmushi and say helplessly, What if the palace master of your Heavenly Palace doesn't agree? After all, I'm an outsider. Don't worry, the palace master of my Heavenly Palace isn't a stubborn old man. Since there's free labor, it would be a waste not to use it. Why wouldn't they agree? Moreover, you are indeed stronger than Tianhe Peak. This is a fact. They will definitely agree, Tianmushi said confidently. Although this was true, Xiao Chen felt uncomfortable when he heard it. What did she mean by free labor? What did she mean by not using it? Tianmushi didn't care about Xiao Chen's expression. As soon as she finished speaking, she prepared to leave. But before she left, she reminded Xiao Chen. We'll leave in half a month. During this time, you can be at ease and stay here. It'll give you and your wife some time together. As for other things, don't worry, no one will come looking for trouble with you again. Xiao Chen believed Tianmushi's words. With Tianmushi's status in the Heavenly Palace, no one would dare to disobey her words. If Tianmushi said that she might not come looking for trouble with Xiao Chen again, then no one would dare to come looking for trouble. She left directly. As Tianmushi left, Xiao Chen sighed softly. At this time, Tian Yu held Xiao Chen's hand and said worriedly, "Husband, why don't I talk to senior sister and tell you not to go? That ghost clan's holy son is probably not an ordinary person." Xiao Chen's safety was always Tian Yu's top priority. Hearing this, Xiao Chen smiled slightly. "Don't worry, it's not a battle to the death. Besides, the great sage of both clans will be there. There shouldn't be any problems." This was indeed not a battle to the death. The great sage of both races was present. Naturally, they would not allow any deaths or injuries to occur. However, Tianyue's words reminded Xiao Chen of something. Both sides had the great sage on their side, but he had nothing to do with Xiao Chen. If something really happened, wouldn't he be in danger? What if the people of the Heavenly Palace couldn't protect him? Moreover, the Ghost Clan was known for being sinister, and their relationship with the human clan was tense. It was hard to guarantee that no accidents would happen. It seemed that he still had to be prepared early. He could not put his safety on the shoulders of the Heavenly Palace. After all, he was not a disciple of the Heavenly Palace. Even if the Heavenly Palace did not save him, it was a very normal thing. Xiao Chen thought to himself. At the same time, Tian Mushi also arrived at the cave residence of the third palace lord of the Heavenly Palace. There were a total of 3 palace lords in the Heavenly Palace, and the third palace lord was called the Heavenly King. At this time, in the Heavenly King's cave residence, Tian Mushi told the Heavenly King about how she went to find Xiao Chen. After hearing Tian Mushi's words, the Heavenly King was a little speechless. He said, "I say, aren't you messing around? Xiao Chen is not a member of the Heavenly Palace. You want him to represent the Heavenly Palace in the battle? What is this?" The Heavenly King was wearing a black robe. He looked middle-aged, had a square face, and was a little tanned. He was not handsome, but he gave off a dignified feeling. When Tian Mushi wanted to let Xiao Chen fight, the Heavenly King's first reaction was that she was crazy. However, seeing this, Tian Mushi was not nervous. She curled her lips. Did the rules say that outsiders are not allowed to do anything? Furthermore, Xiao Chen is clearly more powerful than Tian He. It would be a waste not to use him. Or are you saying that you're not interested in that secret realm, Palace Lord? Nonsense. That secret realm has already been confirmed. It is very precious. The Heavenly Palace is determined to get it this time, the Heavenly King scolded. The Heavenly King's temper was the most explosive among the 3 palace lords. Therefore, Tian Mushi had long been used to his scolding. Not only was she not nervous at all, she even said with a smile, "Then it's fine. If they are determined to get it, don't let the stronger person go and let the weaker person fight." Tian Mushi's words were not without reason. Hearing this, the Heavenly King fell into deep thought. After a while, he shook his head and smiled. "You little girl. Fine, let Xiao Chen represent Tianhe Peak in the battle. There is no loss anyway. It would be a waste not to use him." In the end, he chose to accept Tian Mushi's suggestion. Naturally, there were 2 reasons. Firstly, Xiao Chen was indeed stronger than Tianhe Peak. Secondly, the Heavenly Palace did not need to surface at all. Xiao Chen could be said to be doing voluntary labor. The Heavenly King nodded in agreement, and the matter was completely settled. In the following half a month, it was just as Tian Mushi had said. None of the disciples in the Heavenly Palace dared to make trouble for Xiao Chen. What a joke! Tian Mushi had already said that no one was allowed to provoke Xiao Chen, or they would have to bear the consequences. With Tian Mushi behind them, none of the disciples dared to act recklessly. It was a rare half a month of peace. During this time, Xiao Chen did not think too much about the battle with the chosen of the Ghost Clan. Of course, Xiao Chen still made some preparations. After all, Xiao Chen would not be so foolish as to entrust his safety to the Heavenly Palace. For half a month, Xiao Chen stayed with Tian Yu. Half a month later, it was the day they set off for the border between the 2 clans. Xiao Chen and Tian Yu woke up early in the morning. Xiao Chen was leaving today. Moreover, Shao Chun had already said that he would not return to the Heavenly Palace after this battle. He would head directly to the Beast Clan's territory and then return to the Human Clan. Tian Yu was naturally reluctant to return to the Heavenly Palace. She had already thought of leaving with Shao Chun, but Shao Chun rejected her. It was indeed the best choice for Tian Yu to cultivate in the Heavenly Palace. Moreover, the 100-race war was about to begin. When that time came, the entire central world would be in complete chaos. Thus, it was naturally beneficial for her to take advantage of this time to improve her strength. As for the future, once the 100-race war began, it was naturally Tian Yu's choice whether to stay in the Heavenly Palace or not. Moreover, Shao Chun would probably bring Tian Yu back to the Heavenly Yin Taiyang sect. Accompanied by Tian Yu, they arrived at the Heavenly Palace's main square. At that moment, Tian Mushi, Tian Feng, Tian Tian, and a group of Heavenly Palace elders had already arrived. Seeing Shao Chun arrive, Tian Mushi and Tian Feng did not say anything. Tian Tian was also very normal. However, the elders' attitude towards Shao Chun was somewhat cold. Clearly, they still had some resentment in their hearts. Shao Chun did not care about the elders' indifference at all. He only greeted Tian Mushi and then bowed to Tian Tian. Shao Chun stood to the side and bid farewell to Tian Yu. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1445. Because of this trip to the border of the Tian clan, Shao Chun did not plan to return to the Heavenly Palace. Instead, he planned to go directly to the Beast Clan's territory and then return to the Human Clan. It had been more than 2 years since he went out to train. Shao Chun's improvement was undoubtedly huge. Furthermore, he had successfully become one of the 36 heavenly stars on the Saint rankings. His goal could be considered to have been successfully achieved. Knowing that Shao Chun was going to leave again, Tian Yu was naturally extremely reluctant. However, under Shao Chun's comfort, she was obedient. "All right, it's not like we won't meet again. Cultivate in the Heavenly Palace in peace. If there's anything, send me a message." Shao Chun gently comforted Tian Yu as he held her hand. After waiting for a moment in the main square, everyone arrived. Under the lead of the Heavenly King, the group left the Heavenly Palace through the teleportation array. This trip was naturally led by the Heavenly King, the Great Sage. In addition, there were a total of 12 elders. Among them, 2 were main elders and 10 were ordinary elders. In addition to the elders, there were also deacons and some disciples. Of course, the most important ones were Tian Mushi, Tian Feng, and Shao Chun. This was because the 3 of them represented the Heavenly Palace in the competition for the ownership of this secret realm. There were nearly 100 people. It wasn't a lot, but their strength was definitely not to be underestimated. They safely arrived at the border between the Tian clan's territory and the Ghost clan's territory. The border between the 2 clans was a wasteland called the Heavenly Ghost Plain. Normally, this Heavenly Ghost Plain could be said to be deserted because it was filled with poisonous gas. Even if a martial artist entered it, they would instantly die from the poison once they came into contact with it. With such a dead land as a barrier, the Tian clan and the Ghost clan rarely had any conflicts over territory. Of course, the Ghost clan obviously didn't want to take the initiative to provoke the Tian clan because the Tian clan was very strong, at least far stronger than the Human clan. On the surface, the Heavenly Palace seemed to only have 3 palace lords, but according to many rumors, the power of the Heavenly Palace was definitely not as simple as it appeared on the surface. At least, many people guessed that there were definitely more than 3 the Great Sage in the Heavenly Palace, and that there were other the Great Sage hiding in the dark and rarely showing themselves. In the central world, the Celestial clan was definitely the strongest and most powerful clan. Therefore, even the Ghost clan would not want to provoke the Celestial clan unless it was necessary. In the past, no one would choose to enter the Heavenly Ghost Plane, but on this day, Xiao Chen's group went deep into the plane under the Heavenly King's lead. Before entering the Heavenly Ghost Plane, the Heavenly King gave everyone a pill. This pill was specially refined by the Heavenly Palace, and its only use was to resist the poisonous gas in the plane. They didn't waste any time along the way and had no intention of strolling around the Heavenly Ghost Plane. After all, it was impossible for there to be any treasures in such a wasteland filled with poisonous gas. If it weren't for the fact that the secret realm this time was in the Heavenly Ghost Plane, no one would have come here. After rushing for a day, Xiao Chen's group finally arrived at the entrance of the secret realm. At this time, there were already experts from the Celestial Clan and the Ghost Clan guarding the secret realm. Seeing the Heavenly King's arrival, the experts from the Celestial Clan took the initiative to welcome him and bowed. "Greetings, Palace Lord. Where are the people from the Ghost Clan?" the Heavenly King asked indifferently. Replying to Palace Lord, "The people from the Ghost Clan haven't arrived yet," the leading expert replied. Since the Ghost Tribe had yet to arrive, the Heavenly King did not say anything else. He led everyone into the secret realm. This time, the place where the chosen of the two clans would fight was set in the secret realm. The battle stage had already been built in advance, and at the same time, the talisman array had been carved. After passing through the entrance, the secret realm was completely different from the desolation of the Heavenly Ghost Plane outside. The secret realm was filled with lush greenery, and as far as the eye could see, it was a scene of overflowing vitality. Moreover, the surrounding spiritual qi of heaven and earth was extremely rich. Xiao Chen didn't know what the secret realm was used for, but of course, he wasn't stupid enough to ask. After all, the secret realm had nothing to do with him. It belonged to the Heavenly Palace, and even if he asked, they wouldn't tell him. It was better not to ask for a rebuff. However, no matter what the secret realm was used for, just the rich spiritual qi of heaven and earth was already extraordinary. At the very least, cultivating here would be much faster than cultivating in the outside world. They didn't go deep into the secret realm and stopped at the entrance. There, they saw that a battle stage had already been built. They sat down cross-legged and waited quietly for the arrival of the Ghost Clan's expert. Obviously, they had no intention of bringing medium heat into the depths of the secret realm. After all, the final owner of the secret realm hadn't been determined yet, and some things didn't need to be done too early. After 2 hours, the Ghost Clan's expert finally arrived. The leader was also a quasi-saint great sovereign. However, when Xiao Chen saw the quasi-saint great sovereign from the Ghost Clan, a strange look flashed across his eyes. This was because Xiao Chen knew him. He still remembered that when the Sacred Palace first came to the Central World, they had fallen into the Ghost Clan's territory. At that time, the Sacred Palace was attacked by a great sage sect of the Ghost Clan called the Ghost Emperor sect. The great sage leading the Ghost Clan's expert was the ancestor of the Ghost Emperor sect, Sovereign Gui Shuang. Back then, Xiao Chen was almost killed by Sovereign Gui Shuang. He was directly affected by the spatial turbulence and was forcibly sent to the Demon Clan's territory. In the end, he had to go through untold hardships to return to the Human Clan's territory. He looked directly at Sovereign Gui Shuang, but at this time, Sovereign Gui Shuang obviously didn't care about Xiao Chen. His eyes fell directly on the Heavenly Monarch, and a smile appeared on his face. "Heavenly Monarch, your celestial race doesn't lack secret realms. Why don't you give it to my Ghost Clan? How about we exchange it with other treasures?" Then why don't your Ghost Clan give up? My celestial race can also exchange it with other treasures. The Heavenly Monarch sneered. What a joke. The value of this secret realm, especially those ordinary treasures, couldn't be compared to the value of this secret realm. The great sage and Sovereign Gui Shuang were full of hostility. Xiao Chen was naturally unwilling to accept this. Bored, Xiao Chen sized up the others on the Ghost Clan's side. His gaze swept across everyone one by one, but Xiao Chun didn't expect to see an acquaintance in the Ghost Clan's camp. Emosia was once the first chosen of the Northern Star Boundaries Night Ghost Pavilion. Back then, when the Sacred Palace and the other 5 major sects besieged the Night Ghost Pavilion, Emosia was the first to escape. Although the Sacred Palace had searched for Emosia's whereabouts afterward, they had found nothing. Xiao Chun didn't expect to see him here. His gaze fell on Emosia. At the same time, Emosia also sensed Xiao Chun's gaze and turned his head. Just like Xiao Chun, Emosia was stunned for a moment and unconsciously said, "Xiao Chun. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 1446. Xiao Chun was a little surprised to see Ghost Frost's disciple and Emosia here, especially Emosia. However, Emosia had disappeared after the Night Ghost Pavilion was destroyed in the North Star Boundary. Who would have thought that they would see Emosia in the Central World? However, it was not only Xiao Chun who was surprised. Emosia was also shocked. He did not expect to meet Xiao Chun here. Hearing this, Ghost Frost Emperor also looked at Xiao Chun. In fact, Ghost Frost Emperor had almost forgotten about Xiao Chun. After all, as the Great Sage, Ghost Frost Emperor would certainly not remember a junior warrior like Xiao Chun. Moreover, Xiao Chun had just arrived in the Central World at that time and was not famous at all in the Central World. This made Ghost Frost Emperor even less interested in paying attention to him. However, it was different now. After several years, Xiao Chun was no longer a nobody. On the contrary, Xiao Chun's name was well known throughout the Central World. Looking at Xiao Chun with great interest, Ghost Frost Emperor was also curious. The little guy who was lucky enough to survive back then had grown to such a level now. Of course, he was just curious. This time, Ghost Frost Emperor's purpose was to compete for this secret realm. Therefore, Ghost Frost Emperor only glanced at Xiao Chun, then withdrew his gaze and looked at Heavenly King with a smile. "Let's begin." The Heavenly King did not want to waste any more time. Hearing this, the Heavenly King nodded slightly. Then, the 6 holy sons from both sides stepped forward. However, when he saw Xiao Chun from the Celestial Clan also walking out, Emperor Gui Shuang frowned slightly. "Heavenly King, that kid is not from the Heavenly Clan. Xiao Chun was not a disciple of the Heavenly Palace. He was not even from the Heavenly Clan. However, Xiao Chun was representing the Heavenly Palace at this time." Heavenly King smiled slightly when he heard Ghost Frost Emperor's words. "Indeed, he is not. But is there a problem? This brat volunteered to fight on behalf of our Heavenly Palace. Moreover, he didn't say that it wasn't enough for the foreign Holy Son to fight. He simply admitted Xiao Chun's identity." Hearing the Heavenly King's words, Ghost Frost Sovereign's eyes flashed with coldness, but he couldn't find anything to refute. The Heavenly King was right. When they agreed to send the chosen of the saint ranking to fight, they did not say that they could not send chosen of other races. Therefore, it was not a problem for Xiao Chun to represent the Heavenly Palace. Glancing at Xiao Chun indifferently, Sovereign Ghost Frost did not say anything, but a murderous intent flashed in his eyes, which Xiao Chun keenly caught. "In that case, let's begin." Sovereign Ghost Frost glanced at Xiao Chun and said indifferently. Without refuting the Heavenly King's words, Sovereign Ghost Frost gestured for the battle to begin. Hearing this, the Heavenly King did not say anything. He nodded and ordered his men to prepare the array. The first battle had nothing to do with Xiao Chun. It was Tian Mushi's turn to fight. Therefore, Xiao Chun simply closed his eyes and sat cross-legged below the stage. He paid no attention to the situation on the stage. After all, helping the Heavenly Palace this time did not benefit Xiao Chun. Whether the Heavenly Palace won or lost had little to do with Xiao Chun. All Xiao Chun needed to do was to try his best to win his battle. As for Tian Mushi and Tian Fan's results, it had little to do with Xiao Chun. Moreover, with Tianmushi's strength, there shouldn't be any problems in the first battle. Ignoring the situation on the stage, Shao Chun closed his eyes and adjusted his breathing. However, on the Ghost Clan's side, Emosie's eyes were fixed on Shao Chun from the beginning. To be honest, Emosie's killing intent towards Shao Chun was very strong. After all, the Night Ghost Pavilion had been destroyed by the Sacred Palace and other sections. Emosie and Shao Chun were old enemies back then. As the first chosen of the Night Ghost Pavilion, Emosie's status in the North Star boundary was very high and he lived a comfortable life. However, because of Shao Chun, the Night Ghost Pavilion had been destroyed and he, Emosie, had been forced to wander around the central world. After the Night Ghost Pavilion had been destroyed, Emosie and the others had passed through the horizon and entered the central world first. Emosie remembered that when he first arrived in the central world, he had suffered a lot. In the North Star boundary, Emosie could become the first chosen, but in the central world, Emosie could not. Any chosen on the saint ranking could easily crush him. It could be said that he had fallen from the clouds to the bottom of the valley. In Emosie's opinion, all of this was caused by Shao Chun. If not for Shao Chun, Emosie would not have ended up like this. After experiencing life and death crisis again and again, and losing his companions one after another, Emosie's hatred for Shao Chun grew deeper and deeper. Thinking back, Emosie realized that he had been able to survive back then because of luck. Moreover, it could be said that after suffering, the good times had come. Emosie had now joined the Ghost Emperor sect and become a prospective chosen of the Ghost Emperor sect. However, compared to Shao Chun, his little achievements could not be compared at all. He was only a prospective chosen of the Ghost Emperor sect, while Shao Chun was now one of the 36 heavenly stars on the saint ranking. Whether it was in terms of strength or status, Shao Chun was far superior to Emosie. In the past, Emosie could contend with Shao Chun, but now, he could only look up to Shao Chun's back. This made Emosie even more jealous. With hatred and jealousy, Emosie really wanted to kill Shao Chun directly. However, such thoughts could only remain as thoughts. After all, Emosie also knew that the gap between him and Shao Chun was very big. Once he made a move, he would probably be killed in an instant. The gap had been completely widened. Shao Chun's talent had been fully unleashed in the central world, leaving Emosie and the others, who were once on the same line as him, far behind. Shao Chun ignored Emosie's gaze. In fact, he had already felt that Emosie had been staring at him. At the same time, he also saw the hatred in Emosie's eyes. Emosie wanted to kill him, but this was not strange. On the contrary, Shao Chun actually had the same thought in his heart. Since they had met, if there was a chance, Shao Chun naturally wanted to kill Emosie. After all, keeping an enemy in the world was always a potential threat. Since Emosie had been thinking about how to take revenge, Shao Chun naturally would not give him the chance. However, now was not the time. There were many experts in the ghost race. In this case, it was very difficult for Shao Chun to succeed in killing Emosie. Therefore, he could only wait for an opportunity. As long as there was a chance, Shao Chun would not give Emosie the slightest time to react. He would definitely kill him in one blow. Emosie could only bury his killing intent deep in his heart. Shao Chun had to put it into action. Now, the only thing he lacked was an opportunity to kill Emosie. Since he had met Emosie, he might as well eliminate this potential threat. Although Shao Chun completely looked down on the current Emosie, it was not good news for Shao Chun to have a person in the world who was always thinking about killing him for revenge. Please add, please vote, please recommend. Chapter 1447. Emosie had a deep hatred for Shao Chun. On the other hand, Shao Chun didn't hate Emosie. But if there was a chance, Shao Chun wouldn't be lenient and would send Emosie on his way. Xiao Chun ignored Emosie's resentful gaze. There wasn't a chance now, so it was useless to say anything more. So, Xiao Chun simply ignored him. No one noticed the conflict between Xiao Chun and Emosia. At this moment, everyone's eyes were on the stage. Tian Mushi and a fair-skinned youth from the Ghost Clan stood opposite each other. This youth from the Ghost Clan was the #1 holy son of the Ghost Clan, Gue Yentian, ranked 4th on the Saint rankings. To others, Gue Yentian was indeed very strong. In fact, he was ridiculously strong. But in Tian Mushi's eyes, Gue Yentian was nothing. There was a huge gap between the top 3 and the top 4 that was difficult to cross. Therefore, when facing Gue Yentian, Tian Mushi didn't show the slightest bit of nervousness. Instead, she said indifferently, "Do you want to fight? Or just surrender?" This wasn't the first time she fought with Gue Yentian. But every time, Tian Mushi won. When he heard Tian Mushi's words, Gue Yentian revealed a bitter smile. "Forget it. I won't embarrass myself in the end. I admit defeat." Gue Yentian didn't even have the intention to fight. He directly chose the number of people to surrender. Gue Yentian was truly an exceptional person. As a holy son ranked 4th on the holy rankings, he had chosen to surrender before the battle had even begun. Furthermore, when he said those words, he didn't even have the slightest bit of shame. Instead, he said those words very calmly. After saying those words, Gue Yentian turned around and walked down the stage without caring about the expressions of the people present. Seeing Gue Yentian choose the number of people to surrender, Sovereign Ghost Frost said with an unsightly expression, "Gue Yentian, you're already afraid before the battle." Clearly, even Sovereign Ghost Frost didn't expect Gue Yentian to choose to surrender. At this moment, her expression was somewhat ugly. However, in the face of Sovereign Gue Shuang's rebuke, Gue Yentian did not seem to care at all. "What do you mean by cowering before the battle? You know you can't win, yet you still want to fight. Isn't that stupid?" Gue Yentian didn't feel that there was anything wrong with losing to Tian Mushi. He knew Tian Mushi's strength very well, so he knew the outcome of the battle without even fighting. With that, Gue Yentian ignored Sovereign Ghost Frost's angry stare and went directly to the Ghost Clan's team. He sat down cross-legged and yawned lazily, as if what had just happened had nothing to do with him. Sovereign Ghost Frost really had no way to deal with Gue Yentian. Gue Yentian's talent was naturally indisputable, but his character, how to put it, simply made Sovereign Ghost Frost worry. Of course, if you thought that Gue Yentian was someone who didn't even have the desire to win, then you were gravely mistaken. The reason why he had admitted defeat was because he knew that he had no chance of winning. However, if Gue Yentian caught up to Tian Mushi, then he would definitely fight back. Moreover, from the beginning to the end, Gue Yentian had never given up on trying to reach the top 3 on the Saint rankings. Unfortunately, Tian Mushi and the other 2 freaks had always occupied the top 3 on the Saint rankings. Although Gue Yentian was already trying his best to catch up, not only did the gap between them not close, but it also widened bit by bit. There was a gap in talent. The top 3 freaks on the Saint rankings all had talents that reached the level of 99 meters, but Gue Yentian's talent was still at the level of 98 meters. This was the gap between the 2 sides. The first battle ended when Gue Yentian admitted defeat, and Tian Mushi easily won a point for the Heavenly Palace. Next, as long as Tian Fun or Xiao Qin won another battle, this secret realm would belong to the Heavenly Palace. Stepping off the stage, the second battle quickly began. The second battle was between Tian Fun and Gue Hao from the Ghost Clan. Compared to the first battle, the Ghost Clan clearly had the advantage in this battle. This was because Gue Hao was ranked 5th, higher than Tian Fun. Moreover, the 2 of them had fought before and more than once. However, without exception, Tian Fun had been defeated. It was a similar scene, but the roles had been swapped. This time, it was Gui Hao's turn to speak in an indifferent manner. Tianfun, do you want to fight? Gui Hao had absolute confidence that he would win against Tianfun. Seeing this, a thick fighting spirit surfaced in Tianfun's eyes as he spoke in a deep voice. Fight! Although there was a gap of 2 places between the 7th and 5th place, this gap was clearly not as big as the gap between the 4th and 2nd place. Therefore, it was not impossible for Tianfun to win against Gui Hao. As his voice faded, Tianfun took the initiative to attack without waiting for Gui Hao's reply. He took a step forward, and the mark unique to the Sky Clan appeared on his forehead. A terrifying aura that had reached the saint stage soared into the sky. He suddenly threw out a punch, and the terrifying fist light instantly locked onto Gui Hao. Seeing this, a cold smile flashed across Gui Hao's eyes. An aura that was not weaker than Tianfun's, and was even slightly stronger, soared into the sky. At the same time, his right hand slowly stretched out, and black-colored ghost chi continued to gather. His palm slammed down, and fiercely collided with Tianfun's fist light. The first exchange between the two was terrifying to the extreme. Moreover, what was unexpected was that regardless of whether it was Tianfun or Gui Hao, both of their cultivations had already reached the initial saint stage. Their cultivations had already broken through to the initial saint stage, which was a small realm higher than Shaochen. From the looks of it, the chosens who were ranked in the top 10 of the saint ranking were indeed not simple. There was still quite a large gap between the current Shaochen and them. As the attack landed, both of their attacks cancelled each other out. However, anyone with a discerning eye could see that Tianfun was at a disadvantage. This was because Tianfun had already used the power of the Sky Clan's mark in the attack just now. As for Gui Hao, it was only a casual palm strike, and he did not use the Ghost Clan's ability. Even so, both of them were only evenly matched. It was obvious that Tianfun was at a disadvantage. As the attack landed, the aftershock did not affect the others because of the array's defense. However, at this time, Gui Hao sneered. Tianfun, do you really think that you can be my opponent? As he spoke, a monstrous ghost chi instantly erupted from behind Gui Hao. The dense ghost chi instantly enveloped the entire arena. Then, Gui Hao's figure slowly disappeared into the darkness. This was the Ghost Clan's ability. Back in the Northern Star Realm, Shao Chen had seen Emocie use it. Back then, in order to break this Ghost Clan's ability, Shao Chen had indeed spent a lot of effort. However, the ability that Gui Hao used now was clearly several times stronger than Emocie's. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 1448. Gui Hao used the Ghost Clan's ability. In an instant, the stage was enveloped by endless darkness. Gui Hao also quietly hid in the darkness. It wasn't the first or second time he had fought with Gui Hao. Therefore, Tianfun was naturally not unfamiliar with Gui Hao's methods and knew how to deal with them. The Sky Clan imprint on his forehead emitted waves of gentle white light. The light seemed to be able to pierce through the darkness. Tianfun was indeed using the white light to lock onto Gui Hao's position. It was a pity that Tianfun was very familiar with Gui Hao's methods. However, Gui Hao was also very familiar with Tianfun's method. Therefore, when the Sky Clan imprint on Gui Hao's forehead emitted a faint white light, countless ghost claws appeared in the darkness. They fiercely attacked Tianfun from all directions. Countless ghost claws condensed from ghost aura attacked Tianfun at the same time. Tianfun naturally didn't dare to be careless in the face of such an attack. He extended his right hand and a ball of white light continuously condensed on his hand. Shao Chen had seen this move before. When he fought with Tianhe Peak had also used this move. However, the same ability in the hands of Tianfun and in the hands of Tianhe Peak was almost on a different level. Sky Light Kill. Tianfun let out a deep roar. the white ball of light slowly rose into the sky. After that, countless white light arrows shot out from the ball of light and fiercely collided with the countless ghost claws. On the stage, the white light arrows and the black ghost claws continuously collided. The power of the two's attacks was extremely terrifying. After a head-on collision, the two were still evenly matched. However, at this moment, Gui Hao's figure appeared behind Tianfun at an unknown time. He extended his palm and fiercely attacked Tianfun's back. Gui Hao's sudden sneak attack didn't satisfy Tianfun's reaction. He immediately turned around and counterattacked. After that, the two of them directly engaged in an intense battle. Not bad. Looks like you've improved quite a bit in the past few days. However, Skyburn, you must not forget that you're not the only one who's improving. Gui Hao smiled coldly at Skyburn. Tianfeng had indeed improved a lot these days, but Gui Hao obviously couldn't stay still. If you didn't work hard and improve on the Saint ranking, you would be replaced by others very soon. Therefore, none of the holy princes on the Saint ranking could slack off. They had to cultivate diligently at all times, allowing their strength to surpass their limit. Only then could they stay on the Saint ranking for a long time. There was naturally no need to elaborate on the degree of terror of an intense battle between the top 10 on the Saint rankings. Perhaps it was due to the obsession in his heart, but Tianfun had an endless thirst for victory in this battle. Up until now, Skyburn had always been suppressed when facing Gui Hao. This time, Skyburn wanted to win against Gui Hao again. He wanted to win with all his might. He had a strong desire to win. However, there were some things that were often beautiful, but reality was always unsatisfactory. Tianfeng could be said to be fighting with his life on the line, but Gui Hao still had the upper hand. Xiaoqun, who was sitting cross-legged below the stage, chuckled softly as he watched the two people fighting fiercely in the arena. I really hope that Skyburn can win. Then, there's nothing for me to do. Xiaoqun naturally hoped that Skyburn could win, because as long as Skyburn won, Xiaoqun wouldn't have to go on stage. This was naturally good news for Xiaoqun. However, as soon as Xiaoqun finished speaking, Tianmushi, who was beside him, snapped. Stop daydreaming. Skyburn is no match for Gui Hao. He's bound to lose. Therefore, you still have to go on stage. Xiaoqun hoped that Skyburn could win, but that was obviously impossible. There was a gap in strength, and it wasn't something that could be changed just because one wanted to win. Skyburn had indeed been cultivating hard during this period of time, but Gui Hao hadn't been idle either. Therefore, in terms of strength, Gui Hao was still stronger than Skyburn. Xiaoqun smiled bitterly when he heard Tianmushi's words. I feel that my luck has been a little bad recently. Sigh, I've put in a lot of effort for nothing. There was no benefit for him at all, and he still had to fight to the death with the ghost clans chosen on the Saint ranking. It was really as the saying went, I put in the effort but I took the blame. In the end, the benefits would belong to others. However, what could he do? He had already agreed, and Xiaoqun couldn't go back on his word. Of course, the most important thing was that he wasn't strong enough. Xiaoqun didn't have any thoughts about Tianmushi's strength that day. In addition, Tianmushi had indeed taken care of Tianyu a lot during this period of time, so Xiaoqun agreed. Tianmushi smiled faintly when she heard Xiaoqun's sigh. Don't go back on your word. Moreover, it's best that you don't go easy on me when you go on the stage later. Otherwise, I'll have to take action myself. It could be considered a warning to Xiaoqun. Just as Tianmushi finished speaking, the battle on the stage finally came to an end. As expected, Skyburn was defeated in the end. Although it could be said that Skyburn had already given his all, there was still a gap in strength, so the result didn't change. After sending Skyburn flying with a palm strike, Gui Hao stood on the stage with a helpless expression on his face. It's just an arena battle. Skyburn, why do you have to risk your life like that? Gui Hao was actually a little depressed. Skyburn was a guy who put his life on the line. He looked like he would fight to the death, which made Gue Hao a little confused. Was there a need to be like this in an arena battle? Of course, Gue Hao could understand Skyburn. Skyburn wanted to defeat him too much. Unfortunately, he wasn't strong enough. In the end, Skyburn was defeated. He was helped down the stage by 2 disciples from the Heavenly Palace. Skyburn didn't say a word during the entire process. Clearly, the blow was not small. Tian Mushi glanced at Skyburn indifferently, but didn't say anything. She understood Skyburn's character. He was a man of few words and was a little stubborn. However, such a blow was obviously not enough to shake his mental state. There was no need to worry about it. Skyburn would recover soon. Instead, it was Xiao Chen. Tian Mushi looked at Xiao Chen with a trace of a smile in her eyes. Don't go easy on him. If I see that you're going easy on him, then I'll have to personally settle the matter with you. You killed my Heavenly Palace's chosen on the saint ranking. You know the consequences if I get serious. It could be considered a small threat to Xiao Chen. Hearing that, Xiao Chen helplessly stood up and said, All right, I know. Even if I have a single breath left, I'll fight to the death. Is that enough? That would be for the best. Tian Mushi smiled. The second round ended. Gue Hao had won back 10% for the Ghost Clan. Both sides were now 1 against 1. As such, the third round became the key. The secret realm would belong to whoever won. He slowly walked onto the stage. At the same time, a short youth from the Ghost Clan walked out from the crowd and walked onto the stage. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1449. A short young man from the Ghost Clan stepped onto the arena and stood in front of Xiao Chen. Although he was short, it would be more appropriate to describe him as a midget. He was less than 1.2 meters tall. When he stood in front of Xiao Chen, the top of his head only reached Xiao Chen's waist. He was practically a cripple. However, no one present dared to underestimate this cripple because he was a bona fide sacred child of the saint ranking. He was ranked 3rd among the holy children of the Ghost Clan and 35th among the Judgment Realm, which was just above Xiao Chen. The young man was called Gue Min. He was looking up at Xiao Chen with a cold look in his eyes. I heard that you defeated Tian He Feng some time ago. That's right. That trash doesn't deserve to be one of the 36 celestial saints. However, even though you defeated him, you shouldn't represent the celestial palace in this arena battle. Underworld Ghost, who was only aware of Xiao Chen's waist, raised his head and threatened Xiao Chen. It was a rather comical scene. Hearing this, Xiao Chen did not care much about Gue Min's height. He just smiled helplessly and said, I don't want to, but I have no choice. Xiao Chen was telling the truth. It was true that he had not volunteered to participate in the tournament. He had no choice at all. Gue Min's expression did not change when he heard Xiao Chen's words. He still said coldly, That's your business. Let's fight. Gue Min's body emitted a dense ghost chi as he spoke. Feeling Gue Min's terrifying aura, Xiao Chen felt helpless. Another strong enemy. Although Gue Min's cultivation was also at the beginning Saint Realm, he should be stronger than Tian He Feng in terms of strength. However, there was a limit to his strength. With Xiao Chen's strength, he did have a chance to defeat Gue Min, but it would be very troublesome. Xiao Chen did not want to fight Gue Min to the death. After all, it would not benefit him at all. However, just as Xiao Chen was thinking about this, a faint threatening look came from below the arena. It was obvious that it was Tian Mushi. With Tian Mushi's eyesight, there was no way he could hide from her whether or not he had used his full strength. Sigh, forget it. Let's fight it out then. When one is under the eaves, one has no choice but to lower one's head. Sighing silently, Xiao Chen's aura that was no weaker than Gue Min's erupted from his body. Gui Min was also slightly stunned when he sensed Xiao Chen's aura. He was not unfamiliar with Tianhe Peak, but this was the first time he had seen Xiao Chen. However, the aura that Xiao Chen had revealed at this moment was definitely stronger than Tianhe Peak. At this moment, Gui Min was certain that Xiao Chen's victory over Tianhe Peak was not due to luck. Instead, Xiao Chen truly had the strength to back it up. Gui Min didn't dare to be careless after sensing the threat from Xiao Chen. At the same time, Xiao Chen summoned the dustless sword in his hand. The sword domain and the law of gravity instantly erupted. However, against an opponent of Gui Min's level, the sword domain could be said to be of no threat. Of course, this was also because the level of Xiao Chen's sword realm was too low. Xiao Chen's understanding of the sword realm was still at the beginner level. Although he had reached the limit of the beginner level, there was still no way for him to enter the lower level. It was too difficult to improve the sword domain. It wasn't something that could be done with talent alone. Sometimes it also required an opportunity. What Xiao Chen lacked now was such an opportunity. The sword domain instantly enveloped the entire arena. However, Gui Min didn't care about it at all. Black ghostly qi continued to spread and quickly enveloped the entire arena. Ghost Clan's divine ability, ghostly qi filled the sky. Xiao Chen was actually not unfamiliar with this Ghost Clan's divine ability. He had already experienced it from Mo. However, the ghostly qi fill the sky that Gui Min had used was fundamentally different from Mo's. In other words, Mo's ghostly qi fill the sky was simply trash compared to Gui Min's. Gui Min coldly said as he used the ghostly qi fill the sky. Xiao Chen, you do have some strength to be able to defeat Tianhe Feng. However, it's a pity that your sword domain is only at the entry level. Therefore, you are no match for me in this battle. As he spoke, the black ghostly qi around Xiao Chen continued to envelop Xiao Chen. For a moment, a terrifying pressure instantly crushed Xiao Chen's sword domain. The sword domain was forcibly crushed. After that, the ghostly qi in the surroundings erupted with a terrifying corrosive force. This corrosive force continuously corroded Xiao Chen's spiritual energy. Xiao Chen's sword domain was completely defeated in the confrontation with the ghostly qi filled the sky. At this moment, facing the corrosive ghostly qi in the surroundings, Xiao Chen had no choice but to divert some of his attention to deal with it. As a result, he naturally couldn't fight Gui Min with his full strength. The sword domain wasn't a match for Gui Min's ghostly qi fill the sky. The entry-level sword domain was indeed somewhat insufficient. Xiao Chen tried to use the sword domain several times, but without exception, under the ghostly qi fill the sky's envelopment, his sword domain couldn't be used at all. It was completely suppressed. Seeing Xiao Chen's continuous attempts, Gui Min sneered and said, "Don't waste your energy. The entry-level sword domain isn't a match for my ghostly qi fill the sky. Xiao Chen, you have lost this battle." As he spoke, Gui Min's feet moved. The short saint instantly turned into a black shadow and attacked Xiao Chen. He stretched out his right hand, turned it into a claw, and fiercely grabbed at Xiao Chen. Because his spiritual energy was constantly being corroded by the ghostly qi in the surroundings, Xiao Chen couldn't use his full strength to deal with Gui Min. Therefore, for a moment, Xiao Chen was completely at a disadvantage. In the face of Gui Min's attack, Xiao Chen could only passively defend. Moreover, the corrosion of the ghostly qi in the surroundings could be said to be impossible to guard against. If there was no way to break the ghostly qi fill the sky, Xiao Chen would indeed be defeated in the long run. Many of the Heavenly Palace's disciples, who had been suppressed by Gui Min all this while, spoke up viciously when they saw this scene. Damn Xiao Chen! Is he deliberately holding back? He defeated Tianhe Peak. Now that the Tianmushi world gave him a chance, he actually deliberately held back. Does he want our Heavenly Palace to lose? They didn't have a good impression of Xiao Chen to begin with. Now that Shao Chun was at a disadvantage, these Heavenly Palace disciples muttered in dissatisfaction. With their strength, they naturally couldn't see the battle situation in the arena. They only thought that Shao Chun was deliberately holding back. After all, Shao Chun had defeated Tianhe Peak. If even Tianhe Peak had been defeated by Shao Chun, why would he be in such a sorry state in front of Gui Min? These Heavenly Palace disciples cursed in dissatisfaction. However, Tian Fun and Tian Mushi, who were also saints on the saint rankings, clearly saw that Shao Chun wasn't holding back. Instead, he was being targeted by Gui Min. They didn't expect Gui Min's ghostly qi fill the sky to have such a strong restraining effect on the sword domain. Unless Shao Chun's sword domain could break through, it would be very difficult to break through Gui Min's ghostly qi fill the sky. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1450. The Ghost Energy Sky was one of the more powerful bloodline abilities of the Ghost Clan. As the third holy son of the Ghost Clan, Gui Min's Ghost Energy Sky far surpassed that of the other Ghost Clan members. He had never expected that Gui Min's Ghost Energy Sky would have such a great restraining effect on the sword domain. It directly defeated Shao Chun's sword domain. Below the stage, Tian Fun and Tian Mushi could clearly see that if Shao Chun's sword domain couldn't break through, then he definitely wouldn't be able to resist Gui Min's Ghost Energy Sky. As a result, there was only one choice left, and that was to forcefully shatter Gui Min's Ghost Energy Sky. However, with Shao Chun and Gui Min's strength, it was almost impossible for Shao Chun to forcefully shatter Gui Min's Ghost Energy Sky. There wasn't much of a difference in strength between the two of them. If Shao Chun could forcefully shatter Gui Min's Ghost Energy Sky, then it would truly be inconceivable. It was almost impossible to forcefully shatter Gui Min's Ghost Energy Sky. As a result, he could only rely on the sword domain to resist. Unfortunately, Shao Chun's sword domain was only at the entry level. If he wanted to contend against Gui Min's Ghost Energy Sky, Shao Chun's sword domain had to be at least at the initial level. Looking at Shao Chun, who had been completely suppressed in the arena, not only Tian Fun, but even the Heavenly King and other experts of the older generation had ugly expressions. Only Tian Mushi still had a relaxed expression, as if she didn't think that Shao Chun would lose. The scales of victory seemed to have tilted towards the Ghost Clan. Looking at Gui Min, who had completely suppressed Shao Chun in the arena, the Ghost Clan's side was secretly delighted, while the Tian Clan's side had ugly expressions. Whether it was the Tian Clan or the Ghost Clan, this secret realm was extremely important. Otherwise, the two clans wouldn't have agreed to a battle. Therefore, whether it was the Tian Clan or the Ghost Clan, they both attached great importance to the ownership of this secret realm. Based on the current situation, the possibility of Shao Chun defeating Gui Min was not high. Gui Min could be said to be Shao Chun's nemesis. Think about it, if a sword cultivator couldn't even use his sword domain, how could he fight? His battle prowess had been suppressed by 20 to 30%, so he naturally had no chance of winning. Unless Shao Chun could make a breakthrough in his sword realm. However, the sword realm was not something that could be easily broken through. It should be known that after comprehending the sword realm, every breakthrough was extremely difficult. It was even more difficult than making a breakthrough in cultivation. Along the way, he suppressed Shao Chun. The ghost qi that filled the sky was filled with corrosive ghost qi, which made it impossible for Shao Chun to guard against it. If he was not careful, he would be corroded, which was very troublesome. Gui Min's attacks were fierce. At this moment, Gui Min was having a great time fighting. Everyone liked this kind of battle where he was suppressed all the way. What's more, Shao Chun's ranking beside him was not bad. He was only one rank behind him. Being able to suppress Shao Chun like this made Gui Min's confidence soar. Shao Chun, it looks like I've overestimated you. Your strength can't even compare to Tianhe Peak, Gui Min said coldly as they fought. Xiao Chen's strength could not compare to Tianhe Peak's? This was obviously impossible. During the battle with Tianhe Peak, Xiao Chen did not use any trick. He relied entirely on his own strength to win. The reason why he was like this when facing Gui Min was that Gui Min's ghost qi that filled the sky was too much of a restraint on Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen was unable to fully display his strength. Xiao Chen ignored Gui Min's ridicule. Unable to use his sword domain, he blocked Gui Min's attacks while comprehending the power of the domain. Xiao Chen did not panic as everyone had expected. No one even noticed that Xiao Chen's expression did not change at all during the battle with Gui Min. Gui Min's ghost qi that filled the sky was indeed extremely effective in restraining his sword domain. However, from another point of view, this battle with Gui Min was the opportunity that Xiao Chen had been waiting for. It was an opportunity to break through to the initial level of the sword domain. Ever since he comprehended the sword domain during the battle with Bai Qiran, Xiao Chen had never slacked off in his cultivation of the sword domain. Unfortunately, even though his sword domain had reached the limit of entry, he was still unable to break through to the initial level. Breaking through to the sword domain was not something that could be achieved through constant cultivation. It required an opportunity. Now, Gui Min was Xiao Chen's opportunity to break through to the initial level of the sword domain. Even though the pressure was great, to be honest, Xiao Chen was slightly excited at this moment. The reason was very simple. It was because Gui Min's ghost qi that filled the sky was constantly suppressing his sword domain. In this way, Xiao Chen could faintly sense that his sword domain showed signs of breaking through. Gui Min thought that he had completely suppressed Xiao Chen. However, he obviously did not expect that Xiao Chen was using Gui Min as a whetstone. He was using Gui Min's ghost qi to help him break through to the initial level of the sword domain. He was secretly trying to break through to the initial level of the sword domain. However, in the eyes of outsiders, Xiao Chen had already been beaten by Gui Min to the point that he could not fight back. Seeing that Xiao Chen was about to be defeated, many of the Heavenly Palace disciples below the arena could not help but shout one after another. Hey Xiao Chen, don't play dumb. Since you can defeat senior brother Tian Hefeng, how can you lose to Gui Min? That's right, Xiao Chen. Since you're representing our Heavenly Palace, you should use your full strength. What's the meaning of this? Are you deliberately holding back? Many of the disciples shouted one after another. However, Tian Mushi revealed a faint smile at this moment. A glint flashed in her eyes as she said with a chuckle, "It's about time." Tian Mushi said something inexplicable. Hearing this, Tian Fen asked in confusion, "Senior sister, what do you mean it's about time?" Tian Fen's eyesight was obviously far inferior to Tian Mushi's. Seeing this, Tian Mushi did not say much. She only said softly, "It's about time to decide the outcome." The outcome of the battle had been decided? Hearing this, Tian Fen thought that Tian Mushi meant that Xiao Chen was about to be defeated. However, he clearly did not understand that Tian Mushi did not mean this at all. As if to prove Tian Mushi's words, Gui Min, who was in the ring, suddenly reached out with his claw. Dense black ghost qi instantly converged into a ghost claw. He coldly shouted, "Xiao Chen, you've been playing for so long. It's time to end it. Lose." Hearing Gui Ming's words and facing his killing blow, Xiao Chen unexpectedly revealed a smile and said, "That's right, master. It's time to end it, but the person who will lose will not be me." After saying that, Xiao Chen pointed out with his finger. Mo Yi's sword finger was instantly displayed and fiercely collided with Gui Min's black ghost claw. At the same time, a terrifying domain power gushed out from Xiao Chen's body. Sword domain was displayed once again. However, this time, Gui Min's ghost qi could no longer suppress Xiao Chen's sword domain. Instead, the two sides were evenly matched. It seemed like they were on equal footing. Begging to be collected, begging to be recommended. Chapter 1451. The sword domain, which had been suppressed by the ghost chi, suddenly soared into the sky. At the same time, Gui Min's black ghost claw was also directly destroyed by Mo Ye's sword finger. This sudden change actually happened in the blink of an eye. Gui Min, who was the closest to Xiao Chen, naturally felt it the most clearly. Gui Min's expression changed greatly. Looking at Xiao Chen, he unconsciously exclaimed, "How is this possible? Your sword domain broke through?" In the beginning, Xiao Chen's sword domain was only at the entry level. Naturally, it was suppressed by Gui Min's ghost chi. But now, Xiao Chen's sword domain had broken through to the initial level. It could already compete with Gui Min's ghost chi. Who would have thought that Xiao Chen would actually break through in the battle? His sword domain went from the initial entry level to the initial level. After entering the initial level, the power of the sword domain could be said to have undergone a qualitative change. In the sword domain, Xiao Chen was the master. He could control all the sword chi attacks of the sword domain. At the same time, the initial level of the sword domain was much more powerful than the entry level. With the breakthrough of Xiao Chen's sword domain, the situation on the stage was instantly reversed. Below, Tianmushi revealed a faint smile and whispered faintly, "This Gui Min is really an idiot." Tianmushi somewhat despised Gui Min. If Tianmushi was Gui Min, she would definitely not give Xiao Chen the slightest chance. After suppressing Xiao Chen's sword domain, she would directly attack with all her strength and defeat Xiao Chen in the shortest time possible. Unfortunately, Gui Min was too stupid. After gaining a little advantage, he became boundlessly arrogant. He had been teasing Xiao Chen like a cat playing with a mouse. Little did he know that Gui Min thought that his victory was in the bag, but Xiao Chen had been using Gui Min to try to break through his sword domain. Not only did he not play with the mouse, but he also helped Xiao Chen's sword domain break through to Xiao Chen's level. If this Gui Min was not an idiot, then what was? Hearing Tianmushi's words, Tianfun, who was by the side, also said in shock, "Senior sister already knew?" Naturally, Tianmushi had seen through Xiao Chen's intentions long ago. She smiled faintly when faced with Tianfun's question. Sort of. Other than Tianmushi, no one would have thought that Xiao Chen would actually break through to the initial sword domain at this time. At the same time, the situation on the stage was completely reversed by Xiao Chen. Below, the people of Tian clan, who originally had serious expressions, all heaved a sigh of relief. It was Gui Min's own fault that things had developed to this point. If he had not been overconfident and used all his strength to defeat Xiao Chen in the shortest time possible, it might have been difficult for Xiao Chen to break through his sword realm. But now, everything had been forgotten. Gui Min had single-handedly helped Xiao Chen's sword domain break through to the small accomplishment realm. This was completely his own doing. With a smile on his face, the breakthrough of sword domain made Xiao Chen's mood very good. When he looked at Gui Min, Xiao Chen also said with a smile, "I really have to thank you. If it wasn't for Brother Gui Min, I'm afraid it would have taken a lot of time for me to break through to the sword domain." Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Gui Min's face had already become extremely gloomy. He felt like he was being used by Xiao Chen. Gui Min tightly clenched his teeth and said with overflowing killing intent in his eyes, "Xiao Chen, you're courting death. Heh, you want to kill me now? But I'm afraid you no longer have the ability." Facing Gui Min's anger and killing intent, Xiao Chen didn't care at all and smiled. After breaking through to Xiao Chen's sword domain, Xiao Chen was no longer afraid of Gui Min's ghostly aura. Gui Min's ghostly aura no longer had any suppressive effect on Xiao Chen. As a result, it was already impossible for Gui Min to defeat Xiao Chen. As he spoke, Xiao Chen's gaze inadvertently glanced at Mo Xie in the Ghost Clan's camp. Killing intent flashed through his eyes and no one knew what he was thinking. No one noticed the change in Xiao Chen's gaze. Then, without waiting for Gui Min's reply, Xiao Chen suddenly swung his dustless Jian Yi and a sword light suddenly slashed out. At the same time, he spoke softly. Since I've already achieved my goal, this battle is meaningless. Let's end it. As he spoke, Xiao Chen directly moved forward. At this moment, the tempered battle body was pushed to the extreme. Rays of golden light enveloped Xiao Chen's body. With the initial stage sword domain, Gui Min's ghostly aura no longer had any suppressive effect on Xiao Chen. The originally corrosive ghostly aura was now completely blocked by Xiao Chen's sword domain. One could see that in the sword domain, countless sword auras were crazily attacking the black ghostly aura. Without having to worry about the suppression of the ghostly aura, Xiao Chen could finally go all out and fight with Gui Min. Using the absolute Yin footwork, his figure instantly appeared in front of Gui Min and swung his Jian Yi. Seeing this, Gui Min didn't dare to be careless. Black ghostly aura condensed on his hands, and he raised his hands to defend. The dustless sword fiercely stood on the black ghostly aura. Although Gui Min managed to block the attack, the immense power behind it still forced Gui Min to take a few steps back involuntarily. This strength. Gui Min was shocked. In the previous head-on collision, he could clearly feel that Xiao Chen's terrifying physical strength was almost comparable to the holy sons of the barbarian tribe. How could this be? How could a human possess such a terrifying physical body? Xiao Chen was shocked, but he obviously did not intend to give Gui Min any time to catch his breath. Before Gui Min could recover from his shock, Xiao Chen jumped on him again. The two of them fought fiercely again, but the situation this time was different from before. Xiao Chen changed his previous disadvantageous position, and his powerful attacks enveloped Gui Min. Gui Min could only bitterly hold on. The strength of a physical body was so unreasonable. Moreover, don't forget that the tempered battle body had a terrifying recovery ability, so Xiao Chen didn't have any worries. He could completely exchange blows with Gui Min. Gui Min cried bitterly as he fought fiercely with Xiao Chen. As the fierce battle continued, after about 2 hours, Tian Mushi, who was below the stage, stretched and said indifferently, "The outcome has been decided. Well done." She seemed to be very satisfied. As soon as Tian Mushi's voice fell, on the stage, Xiao Chen's sword slashed down. The scorching sun sword instantly erupted. Gui Min, who was already exhausted, was no longer able to resist Xiao Chen's sword and was directly sent flying. Defeated. Gui Min was actually defeated. Seeing Gui Min being sent flying by Xiao Chen's sword and the terrifying law of fire surrounding Gui Min, as if to burn him to ashes, the faces of the ghost tribe below changed. A glint of anger flashed in their eyes. They didn't expect Gui Min to be defeated in the end. Please add me to your collection, monthly vote, recommend me. Chapter 1452. Defeated, the final result was Bei Ming's defeat. Faced with such an outcome, the Tian clan was naturally very excited, but the Ghost clan found it hard to accept. Gui Min's defeat meant that this secret realm would belong to the Tian clan. This was definitely a result that the Ghost clan did not want to see. Even Sovereign Ghost Frost's expression was extremely ugly at this time. Gui Min, who originally had the absolute advantage, was defeated in the end. Not only that, it could be said that Xiao Chen's breakthrough in the sword domain was caused by Gui Min. If Gui Min could defeat Xiao Chen with all his strength from the beginning, then Xiao Chen would not have the possibility of breaking through to the initial sword domain. Trash! Sovereign Ghost Frost cursed in a low voice. He did not even want to look at Gui Min. This was simply an idiot. It was clearly a good hand, but it was smashed by him. All the Ghost clan experts present were disappointed because of Gui Min's defeat. At the same time, no one expected that at this time, Xiao Chen would actually do something that no one expected. With Gui Min's defeat and the closing of the formation, all the Ghost Clan experts' gazes were focused on Gui Min. Shao Chun moved his feet and charged towards Emosia in the Ghost Clan camp like lightning. That's right, defeating Gui Min was only one of Shao Chen's goals. Secondly, Shao Chen wanted to kill Emosia. Since the first time he saw Emosia here, Shao Chen had already made up his mind. If he had the chance, he would definitely kill this person. Although there was no comparison between him and Emosia now, it was always dangerous to leave a person who was always thinking about how to kill him for revenge in this world. Shao Chun was especially afraid that Emosia would attack the people around him. If he had not met Emosia, then it would have been fine. However, he had met Emosia here. Naturally, Shao Chun could not pretend that he did not see him. It would be fine if he did not have the chance, but now all the Ghost Clan experts' attention was on Gui Min. As an ordinary prospective Holy Son, naturally no one paid attention to Emosia. Therefore, how could Shao Chun miss such a good opportunity? Without the slightest hesitation, Emosia, who was originally standing at the edge of the crowd, suddenly felt a sharp killing intent enveloping his body. He looked back in horror and saw that Shao Chen was already rushing towards him with the Wuchen sword in his hand. Shao Chen wants to kill me? Emosia immediately understood Shao Chen's intentions when he saw this scene. He never expected Shao Chen to be so decisive and audacious. It was certain that Shao Chen did not plan to kill Emosia, because Shao Chen did not know that Emosia would appear here. Similarly, Emosia did not know that he would meet Shao Chen here. Neither of them had the ability to predict the future, so it was impossible for them to have premeditated in advance. There was only one explanation. Shao Chen wanted to kill Emosia after seeing him. Of course, Emosia also wanted to kill Emosia. Unfortunately, he did not expect Shao Chen to choose to attack so decisively. After all, there was a group of Ghost Clan experts by Emosia's side right now. There was even the great sage of the Ghost Clan present. Under such circumstances, Shao Chen could not be described as audacious anymore. He was simply a madman. Dense killing intent flickered in Shao Chen's eyes. He knew very well that he only had one chance. If he failed, he would not have a second chance. His eyes were instantly filled with horror. Emosia naturally did not have the slightest intention to fight Shao Chen. Just a second ago, Gui Min had been defeated by Shao Chen. How could Emosia be a match for Shao Chen? Fear filled his face. At the same time, when Shao Chen rushed in front of Emosia, the Ghost Clan and Celestial Clan experts also noticed Shao Chen's actions. It was not that the mighty ones from the two clans were slow to react. On the contrary, they had already noticed Shao Chen's actions right away. However, due to the suddenness of the situation and Shao Chen's incredible speed, it took only the blink of an eye for him to make his move. A powerful being from the ghost race bellowed furiously. "Human, you're courting death." The fact that Shao Chen wanted to kill the younger generation of the Ghost Clan had infuriated the Ghost Clan. On the other hand, the Celestial Clan, including the Celestial Clan, the Celestial Clan, the Celestial Clan, and Tian Mushi, all looked puzzled. They obviously could not understand why Shao Chen wanted to kill Emosia. Emosia was only a prospective holy son of the Ghost Emperor sect. To someone like Shao Chen, it was impossible for the two of them to have any interactions. Emosia could not possibly be a threat to Shao Chen. Even so, Shao Chen still wanted to kill Emosia. From the looks of it, he had no intention of holding back at all. The noble clan expert roared in anger, but it was too late. Shao Chen did not hesitate at all. He slashed out with his sword. The Scorching Sun sword technique was instantly enhanced by the law of fire, as well as the minor completion sword domain. The sword's power was terrifying to the extreme. Shao Chen did not hold back at all. He wanted to kill Emosia and not give him any chance to escape. Emosia watched as the flaming sword rapidly approached him. At the same time, an indifferent voice sounded in his ears. I still prefer to nip danger in the bud. These words were obviously spoken by Xiao Chen. However, Mo Xie did not have the chance to speak. He could only watch as the flaming sword grew larger and larger in front of his eyes. Then, before Mo Xie could react, the flaming sword slashed across his neck. Immediately, a bloody head flew into the air. After killing Mo Xie with a single slash, Xiao Chen did not hesitate to retreat when Xiao Chen slashed out with his sword. Regardless of whether this slash succeeded or not, Xiao Chen knew very well that there would not be a second chance. Therefore, after the attack, Xiao Chen began to retreat before Mo Xie died. Then, when Mo Xie fell to the ground, Xiao Chen had already arrived in the Heavenly Clan's camp and stood beside Tian Mushi. What a joke! The Ghost Clan experts would definitely be furious after killing Mo Xie. If he continued to stand there foolishly, he would be courting death. Therefore, Xiao Chen retreated immediately. The result was very satisfying for Xiao Chen. Mo Xie died, and he returned to the safe zone in the Heavenly Clan's camp. All of this ended in just a few breaths. Looking at Mo Xie's corpse falling straight down, the experts of the Ghost Clan were furious. A half-step great sage expert of the Ghost Clan shouted at Xiao Chen at this time with overflowing murderous intent. Xiao Chen, you're courting death. After saying that, the half-step great saint expert from the Ghost Clan prepared to attack. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 1453. Xiao Chen had actually killed Mo Xie in front of so many Ghost Clan experts. Although Mo Xie was not considered an outstanding young talent in the Ghost Clan, Xiao Chen's killing of him was tantamount to slapping the Ghost Clan experts in the face. It was not to avenge Mo Xie, but to embarrass the Ghost Clan. Therefore, as soon as the half-step great saint from the Ghost Clan finished speaking, he reached out his hand and grabbed at Xiao Chen across the air. Just as the half-step great saint from the Ghost Clan made his move, a Heavenly Palace main elder from the Heavenly Clan also stepped forward. With a light slap, he immediately shattered the attack of the half-step great saint from the Ghost Clan. What does the Heavenly Palace mean? Do you want to protect this boy? Gue Zhu, who was a half-step great saint, shouted with a gloomy face after being stopped by the Heavenly Palace main elder. Hearing this, the Heavenly Palace main elder only said indifferently, "After all, Xiao Chen is representing the Heavenly Palace. I'm afraid it's against the rules for the Ghost Clan to kill him now." Naturally, the Heavenly Palace main elder did not have the idea of protecting Xiao Chen. After all, Xiao Chen was not a member of the Heavenly Palace. However, Xiao Chen had just represented the Heavenly Palace in the battle and won, allowing the Heavenly Palace to win the ownership of the Secret Realm. As such, if the Ghost Clan experts were to attack Xiao Chen now, the Heavenly Palace would naturally lose face. However, just as the Heavenly Palace main elder finished speaking, Sovereign Master Gue Shuang finally spoke. However, his gaze directly ignored the main elder and fell on the Heavenly King. Heavenly King, what does the Heavenly Palace mean? This boy killed a young talent of the Ghost Clan. Does the Heavenly Palace want to protect him? Hearing Sovereign Ghost Frost's words, the Heavenly King was actually filled with doubts. Originally, the matter was already over. Xiao Chen had defeated Gue Min, so this mystic realm should have belonged to the Heavenly Palace. However, Xiao Chen had suddenly erupted and killed a prospective holy son of the Ghost Clan. It just so happened that this prospective holy son was the Ghost Sovereign's disciple, so Sovereign Ghost Frost's intervention was understandable. Moreover, since Xiao Chen had killed someone in public, the Ghost Clan would definitely not let the matter rest. The Heavenly King obviously had no intention of fighting to the death with the Ghost Clan for Xiao Chen. Therefore, after hearing Sovereign Gue Shuang's words, the Heavenly King looked directly at Xiao Chen and said, "Xiao Chen, why did you kill that candidate? asked Yi Futian. Obviously, he wanted Shao Chen to give a reasonable explanation. At the same time, the Heavenly King did not answer Sovereign Ghost Frost's question. Instead, he asked Shao Chen, which also expressed the Heavenly King's position. That was what Shao Chen had done, so he had to settle it himself. The Heavenly Palace would not protect him. Understanding the Heavenly King's implication, Shao Chen was not surprised. Facing the angry gazes of the Ghost Clan experts, Shao Chen said, "Oh, Xie and I are both from the North Star boundary. We have some personal grudges before. Today, when I saw him, I couldn't help but take action." Couldn't help but take action? Hearing Shao Chen's words, the faces of the Ghost Clan experts, led by Sovereign Ghost Frost, turned even uglier. Shao Chen had killed a candidate of their Ghost Clan for no reason, and his attitude was still so perfunctory. It felt as if he was looking down on the Ghost Clan. Given the relationship between the Ghost Clan and the Human Clan, the Ghost Clan experts were already very unhappy when they saw Shao Chen today. Now that Shao Chen had suddenly killed a candidate of the Ghost Clan and acted so arrogantly, the Ghost Clan experts were even more furious. Sovereign Ghost Frost was so angry that he laughed. At this time, he sneered and said, "Good, good. Little guy, you have guts." Then, Sovereign Ghost Frost looked at the Heavenly King and said, "Heavenly King, is the Heavenly Palace going to protect this boy?" Since Shao Chen had dared to kill someone, the Ghost Clan naturally would not let him leave so easily today. Hearing this, the Heavenly King said indifferently, "This is a matter between the Ghost Clan and Shao Chen. It has nothing to do with the Heavenly Palace." The Heavenly King's words made his position clear. Sovereign Ghost Frost smiled coldly. Tian Mushi, who stood beside Shao Chen, also looked at Shao Chen suspiciously. "Are you crazy? Why did you kill someone here?" In Tian Mushi's opinion, Shao Chen should know that the Heavenly Palace would not protect him, so why did he still kill Xie? Was Shao Chen really so naive to think that the Heavenly Palace would become enemies with the Ghost Clan for him? Hearing Tian Mushi's words, Shao Chen smiled indifferently and said, "Didn't I already say before that I have some personal grudges with him? I couldn't hold back just now, so I attacked." Although she knew that Shao Chen was talking nonsense, Tian Mushi was not interested in the grudge between Shao Chen and Xie. Now, Tian Mushi was more concerned about how Shao Chen was going to deal with the situation at hand. The Heavenly Palace obviously would not step forward to protect Shao Chen. So, how would Shao Chen deal with the experts of the Ghost Clan present? It should be known that even if Sovereign Ghost Frost and the other experts of the older generation could not attack Shao Chen because of the Heavenly Dao's protection, don't forget that there was still Gue Yentian in the Ghost Clan. With Gue Yentian's strength, killing Shao Chen was not a problem at all. A strange look flashed in Tian Mushi's eyes. She said with some displeasure, "Then what do you plan to do now? Trade a life for a life." In Tian Mushi's opinion, Shao Chen was simply courting death. He clearly knew that the Heavenly Palace would not step forward to protect him, yet he still wanted to attack. Sure enough, as soon as Tian Mushi finished speaking, Sovereign Ghost Frost said indifferently, "Yentian, go kill this boy and avenge Xie." Sure enough, just as Tian Mushi had thought, Sovereign Ghost Frost really did order Gue Yentian to attack. Seeing Gue Yentian slowly walk towards Shao Chen, Tian Mushi took a step forward, but before she could speak, the Heavenly King's voice rang out. "Mushi, this is a matter between Shao Chen and the Ghost Clan. Don't meddle." The Heavenly King clearly did not intend to interfere in this matter. Hearing this, Tian Mushi did not want to agree, but before she could refute, Shao Chen had already patted her shoulder. "Alright, do I look like the kind of person who would court death? Since I dared to attack, it's naturally impossible for me not to be prepared." Originally, Tian Mushi had planned to refute the Heavenly King. With her temperament, she would not listen to the Heavenly King's every order, But at this moment, Xiao Chen spoke first, causing Tian Mushi to be stunned. She looked at Xiao Chen suspiciously. At the same time, Xiao Chen also arrived in front of Gui Yentian. Seeing the fearless Xiao Chen, Gui Yentian laughed. "You're very confident, but do you really think that you can defeat me just because you defeated Gui Min? I can take on 3 people like Gui Min alone." Gui Yentian naturally looked down on Xiao Chen. With his strength, he could practically crush Xiao Chen without a doubt. However, just as Gui Yentian finished speaking, before Xiao Chen could reply, an indifferent voice rang out from the secret realm's entrance. "Haha, Gui Yentian, long time no see. Your ability to brag without blushing has improved again. I have urgent matters to attend to today, so I only have 2 chapters. Brothers, please forgive me. I will update normally tomorrow." Chapter 1454. Gui Yentian turned to look at the entrance of the secret realm. Long Yang, the voice had come from Long Yang's mouth. At this moment, Long Yang and the Dragon Emperor slowly walked into the secret realm under everyone's gazes. Gui Yentian, Tian Wang, and Gui Shuang, the 2 great saint sovereigns' expressions changed when they saw the 2 of them appear. Long Yang was fine, but the Dragon Emperor was the head of the dragon race and the great sage. His sudden appearance made Gui Shuang and the Heavenly King apprehensive. Facing everyone's gazes, Long Yang walked up to Xiao Chen with a lazy smile and said, "I knew you wouldn't let us come for anything good." Long Yang and the Dragon Emperor. This was Xiao Chen's confidence. Before he set off, Xiao Chen had already sent a message to Long Yang, explaining his situation and asking him to come over. Naturally, Xiao Chen couldn't pin his hopes on the Heavenly Palace, but to be honest, he trusted the dragon race very much. This wasn't because Xiao Chen was familiar with the dragon race, but because of Long Qing. After hearing Long Yang's words, Xiao Chen smiled helplessly and said, "Can it be solved by killing a quasi-holy son of the ghost race?" Now wasn't the time, so Xiao Chen briefly explained the situation. After hearing that Xiao Chen had only killed a quasi-holy son of the ghost race, Long Yang stretched his waist and said, "Small matter." In Long Yang's opinion, Xiao Chen had only killed a quasi-holy son, so it wasn't a big deal. The holy sons of the Ghost Emperor were the same as the Sun Yang sect. If there weren't 100 of them, then there were at least 80. After saying that, Long Yang turned to Gui Yentian and said impatiently, "It's just a quasi-holy son. Gui Yentian, you can't be so petty, right?" Gui Yentian naturally didn't have any temper in front of Long Yang. Even though Long Qing's ranking on the holy rankings was only 1 rank higher than his, in terms of strength, Long Yang's strength wasn't inferior to Tian Mushi's. There was almost no difference in strength between the top 3 of the holy rankings. It was difficult to say who was stronger and who was weaker. Therefore, the world regarded Long Yang, Tian Mushi, and the others as existences on the same level. There was no difference in strength. Long Yang clearly wanted to stand up for Xiao Chen, or rather, Long Yang and the Dragon Emperor appeared because of Xiao Chen. Standing beside Xiao Chen, Tian Mushi curled her lips and said, "This is where your confidence comes from? It seems like you've already thought it?" "I can't help it. I have to be careful when I'm out, right?" Xiao Chen replied with a smile, not minding what he said. Facing Long Yang, Gui Yentian no longer had the intention to fight. Firstly, he was no match for Long Yang. Secondly, Mo Xie's life and death had nothing to do with him. They didn't know each other at all. If it weren't for Sovereign Gui Shuang, Gui Yentian probably wouldn't have taken action. Just as Gui Yentian was silent, Sovereign Ghost Frost looked at the Dragon Emperor and said, "Dragon Emperor, you want to interfere in this matter?" Hearing this, the Dragon Emperor, who had already arrived beside Xiao Chen, sneered and said, "I'm not interested in meddling in your business, but I'm taking Xiao Chen away." The Dragon Emperor didn't have much thoughts about this secret realm, because he knew very well that neither the Heavenly Palace nor the Ghost Race would let go of this secret realm easily. There was no need to fight for it. After all, his purpose here was to bring Shao Qin back to the Dragon Race. Hearing this, Sovereign Ghost Frost's face darkened, but he didn't say anything in the end. Since the Dragon Emperor had personally come, Sovereign Ghost Frost couldn't fight the Dragon Emperor to the death for Emocia. It was obviously not worth it. To put it bluntly, Emocia's life and death didn't have much impact on Sovereign Ghost Frost and the entire Ghost Emperor sect. Sovereign Ghost Frost gave in, but he still glared coldly at Shao Qin. After all, Shao Qin had humiliated the Ghost Race today, so Sovereign Ghost Frost was naturally unhappy. The matter was resolved satisfactorily, and the Heavenly King didn't have any objections from the beginning. This matter had nothing to do with the Heavenly Palace. Sovereign Ghost Frost wanted to kill Shao Qin, and Shao Qin wasn't a disciple of the Heavenly Palace. Now that the Dragon Emperor had come to protect Shao Qin, it had nothing to do with the Heavenly Palace. Therefore, no matter what the final result was, it had nothing to do with the Heavenly Palace. Since Sovereign Ghost Frost had given in, the Dragon Emperor didn't have any intention of staying. He planned to leave with Shao Qin, but before he left, Shao Qin said to Tianmushi, "I'll have to trouble you to take care of Tianyu in the future." Shao Qin had already fulfilled his promise. Hearing this, Tianmushi naturally nodded. "You don't have to say that." The matter was over, and Shao Qin had nothing to do with it. According to the previous agreement, this secret realm now belonged to the Heavenly Palace. After Shao Qin defeated Gui Min, his ranking on the Saint rankings rose from 36th to 35th. Don't underestimate this increase in ranking. Each of the 36 Heavenly Dipper Saint sons on the Saint rankings was extremely powerful. It was already very impressive to be able to increase one's ranking. "Let's go, kid. Qing often talks about you. This time, you can go back and spend more time with her." Now that there was nothing else, the Dragon Emperor looked at Shao Qin and said, "During this period of time, Long Qing had indeed often missed Shao Qin. If there was anyone in the world that Long Qing was most worried about, it would undoubtedly be Shao Qin. Even Chen Ling couldn't compare to him. In addition, in these few years, Shao Qin had been training alone outside. With the situation in the Central World, Long Qing was naturally worried. It was precisely because of Long Qing's worry that the Dragon Emperor personally made this trip. Otherwise, the Dragon Emperor obviously wouldn't have bothered with Shao Qin's letter. The Great Sage wasn't someone that Shao Qin could casually order around. It was even more impossible for him to personally travel from the Dragon Clan to the Heavenly Ghost Plane. Only Long Qing could do this. With how much the Dragon Emperor spoiled Long Qing, a single word from Long Qing was enough to make the Dragon Emperor personally make a trip. Hearing the Dragon Emperor's words, Shao Qin naturally nodded in response. At the same time, he cupped his hands and thanked the Dragon Emperor. The Dragon Emperor really didn't care much about Shao Qin's gratitude. He waved his hand and said, "Let's go." Then, under the Dragon Emperor's lead, Shao Qin and Long Yang directly left the secret realm. Not long after Shao Qin and the other two left, Sovereign Gui Shuang also left with a group of Ghost Clan members. This secret realm completely belonged to the Heavenly Palace. The matter was settled, but at this moment, the Heavenly King's eyes were thoughtful. He said to Tianmushi, "Mushi, what do you think of Shao Qin? How should I put it? However, if Shao Qin doesn't die, he will definitely be a difficult opponent in the future." Hearing this, Tianmushi replied with a smile, "Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 1455. In the beginning, the Heavenly King didn't pay much attention to Shao Qin. After all, although Shao Qin had become one of the 36 saints on the saint rankings in just a few years, he was still considered a junior to the Great Sage like the Heavenly King. Moreover, there was a peerless genius like Tian Mushi in the heavenly palace. Compared to her, Xiao Chen naturally paled in comparison. In the beginning, the heavenly king looked down on Xiao Chen. However, as he came into contact with Xiao Chen, the heavenly king's intuition told him that Xiao Chen wasn't simple. His potential was extremely terrifying. That was why the heavenly king had asked such a baffling question. However, what surprised the heavenly king even more was that Tian Mushi's evaluation of Xiao Chen was so high. One had to know that in the entire central world, there were only two people that Tian Mushi considered a worthy opponent. Even the number one saint of the ghost clan, Gui Yantian, wasn't something that Tian Mushi even thought highly of. This could be seen from how Gui Yantian didn't even have the confidence to fight with Tian Mushi. As for Xiao Chen, Tian Mushi believed that Xiao Chen would definitely be a difficult opponent in the future. In other words, could Xiao Chen grow to the same level as Tian Mushi, Long Yang, and the others? The heavenly king didn't dare to imagine it. He knew very well how difficult it was to reach Tian Mushi's level. He asked himself honestly, there was a huge gap between the young heavenly king and Tian Mushi, Long Yang, and the others. Could Xiao Chen grow to this level? Unaware of the discussion between Tian Mushi and the heavenly king, Xiao Chen returned to the Dragon Clan with Long Yang under the lead of the Dragon Emperor. The great sage's speed was very fast. Therefore, even though they had set off from the heavenly ghost plane, the three of them returned to the Dragon Clan in less than 2 days. It had been 2 years since they left the human domain. Xiao Chen was completely relaxed after returning to the Dragon Clan. Xiao Chen didn't need to worry about anything in the Dragon Clan. At the same time, Xiao Chen also saw Long Qing. In 2 years, Long Qing had also made great progress. His cultivation had also broken through to the half-saint realm. He was only half a step away from breaking through to the saint realm and becoming a saint. The siblings were naturally very happy to meet each other. They chatted for a while and talked about their experiences in the past 2 years. Of course, there was not much to talk about in the Long Qing period. Since coming to the Dragon Clan, Long Qing had been cultivating. There were many cultivation mystic realms in the Dragon Clan that were of great help to Long Qing. At least, the Yin and Yang sect couldn't give Long Qing these things. After chatting with Long Qing, Xiao Chen settled down in the Dragon Clan. Early the next morning, Xiao Chen had just stopped cultivating. He wondered if it was time to return to the human clan. After all, he had been out for 2 years. His cultivation had also broken through to the saint realm. Xiao Chen had also become one of the 36 Tiangang saints on the saint list. He had achieved his goal. Just as Xiao Chen was thinking about whether he should return to the human clan, Long Yang took the initiative to come to him early in the morning. Seeing Xiao Chen, Long Yang smiled softly and said, "Brother Xiao Chen, are you thinking about returning to the human clan?" Long Yang guessed Xiao Chen's thoughts. Hearing this, Xiao Chen wasn't surprised. He didn't mean to hide it. He nodded and said, "I plan to go back. After all, I've been out for a long time." In the past 2 years, Xiao Chen really missed Qin Shuru, his 3 daughters, and his parent. However, hearing Xiao Chen's words, Long Yang smiled and said, "I suggest that Brother Xiao Chen stay in the Dragon Clan for the time being. After all, the Tiangang inheritance will be activated soon." The Tiangang inheritance, which was the great opportunity that Long Yang had mentioned before, could only be obtained by the 36 Tiangang saints. There were a total of 108 people in the sacred palace. They were made up of the 36 Tiangang saints and 72 earthly fiends. Every time the 100 Race War began, the Heavenly Way would activate the Tiangang inheritance. The so-called Tiangang inheritance could only be obtained by the 36 Tiangang saints. The 72 earthly fiends saints were not qualified. Every time someone received the Tiangang inheritance, their cultivation would increase tremendously within a few months. According to Long Yang, Xiao Chen, who was at the initial saint realm, could at least break through to the Saint Realm Greater Mastery if he received the Tiangang inheritance. As for Long Yang, who was at the Saint Realm Lesser Mastery, he could at least break through to the Saint Realm Lesser Mastery after receiving the Tiangang inheritance. Of course, the level of breakthrough was directly related to one's talent. The more talented one was, the more benefits one would receive and the greater the improvement. However, no matter what, the Tiangang inheritance was a great opportunity. It was an opportunity that the Heavenly Way had personally gifted to the 36 Tiangang Saint. After introducing the Tiangang inheritance to Shaochen, Long Yang guessed that the 100-race war was about to begin. Thus, the Tiangang inheritance should be available in the next few days. Therefore, instead of going to the human race at this time, Shaochen might as well stay in the Dragon Clan and wait for the Heavenly Dipper inheritance to come to an end before returning to the human race. After hearing Long Yang's words, Shaochen pondered for a moment before nodding. In that case, I'll stay. However, Brother Long Yang, the Tiangang inheritance has been activated. How do we receive it? This was the first time Shaochen had heard about the Tiangang inheritance. He was very curious about it. Long Yang smiled. I don't know either. I've never received the Tiangang inheritance. It's just that there are records in the Dragon Clan. In fact, there's no need to think too much about it. If the Tiangang inheritance is activated, the will of the Heavenly Way will handle it. We just need to follow the will of the Heavenly Way's thoughts. The Tiangang inheritance was given to the 36 Tiangang saints by the will of the Heavenly Way. Long Yang's meaning was obvious. In any case, Shaochen was now one of the Tiangang saints. When the Tiangang inheritance was activated, Shaochen would naturally have a share. After hearing Long Yang's words, Shaochen nodded. Indeed, Shaochen and the others couldn't control the Tiangang inheritance. They could only act according to the will of the Heavenly Way. Shaochen dismissed the idea of returning to the human clan. Since the Tiangang inheritance was about to be activated, he naturally wanted to see what kind of terrifying effects this great opportunity that Long Yang was looking forward to. In any case, according to Long Yang, as long as one could obtain the Tiangang inheritance, they would improve greatly. At the very least, it would be a leap in their strength. Since they had already reached the Saint Realm, they would be able to break through at least 2 small realms within a few months. This indeed showed how terrifying the Tiangang inheritance was. After staying in the Dragon Clan, the Dragon Emperor also knew that Shaochen and Long Yang were both waiting for the Tiangang inheritance. As for Long Qing, she continued to cultivate in seclusion after accompanying Shaochen for 2 days. Long Qing wasn't a Tiangang saint, so she didn't have the opportunity to obtain the Tiangang inheritance. Therefore, she could only rely on her own efforts to cultivate. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 1456. Long Qing continued to cultivate in seclusion. She was not the Big Dipper saint, so she could not obtain the Big Dipper inheritance. However, there were many cultivation mystic realms in the dragon tribe that would be of great help to Long Qing. Without Long Qing by his side, Shaochen began to cultivate the 8th finger of the 9 heaven sword finger, the red heaven sword finger. Like the Moi sword finger, the red heaven sword finger was also a middle sacred class martial skill. However, it had already reached the limit of the middle sacred class martial skill. Its power was stronger than the Moi sword finger. Originally, after breaking through to the Saint Realm, Shaochen had already begun to cultivate the red heaven sword finger. However, after intermittent cultivation, he still did not succeed in cultivating the red heaven sword finger. This time, since he had to wait for the opening of the Big Dipper inheritance, Shaochen planned to cultivate the red heaven sword finger properly. At the very least, he would cultivate it to the entry level. There was a cave dwelling specially for Shaochen to stay in, and there were even maids to serve him. Xiao Qin was treated very well in the dragon tribe and was definitely an important guest. Xiao Qin spent half a month cooped up in the cave practicing the Red Cloud Sword Finger. Finally, he reached the beginner level of the Red Cloud Sword Finger. At the same time, as he cultivated the Red Heaven Sword Finger, Xiao Qin also comprehended the Law of Gold. This was somewhat out of Xiao Qin's expectations. In truth, with Xiao Qin's current level of cultivation, Level 1 laws were no longer of much help to him. However, one should not forget that if he could successfully comprehend all 5 laws of the elements, he would have the opportunity to comprehend the 5 laws of the element. The 5 laws of the elements were Level 3 laws of laws, which were much stronger than the laws of gravity. After comprehending the law of fire, the law of water, and the law of gold, Xiao Qin only needed to comprehend the law of wood and the law of earth. Then, he could try to fuse the martial ancestor law and comprehend the Level 3 law of 5 elements laws. Xiao Qin had gained a basic mastery of the Scarlet Firmament Sword Finger and also comprehended the law of metal. After half a month of cultivation, Xiao Qin had gained a lot. At night, Xiao Qin was sitting cross-legged and cultivating as usual. However, at this moment, an inexplicable force suddenly descended from the sky and enveloped Xiao Qin. He had never felt such power before. It did not feel like the power of a martial artist's cultivation. Enveloped by this power, Xiao Qin could not resist at all. Of course, this power had no intention of harming Xiao Qin. At the same time, it wasn't just Xiao Qin. Long Yang, Tian Mushi, Tian Fun, Gui Yentian, and the other Heavenly Dipper saints were also enveloped by this power. In every corner of the central world, such forces descended from the sky. These forces were like pillars of light that connected the heavens and the earth. They pierced through the darkness and emitted a faint white light. From an outsider's perspective, these 36 white pillars of light were incomparably holy and gave people an incomparably peaceful feeling. At this moment, the space around the 36 Heavenly Dipper saints that were enveloped by this mysterious force gradually distorted. Then, their entire bodies seemed to be forcefully sucked into space and disappeared. On this night, all 36 Heavenly Dipper saints on the saint rankings disappeared from the central world. No one knew where they went, but the great sage in the central world was not worried. They all knew that the Heavenly Dipper inheritance had been activated. There was no precise time when the Heavenly Dipper inheritance would be activated. It all depended on the will of the Heavenly Way. If the will of the Heavenly Way planned to activate the Heavenly Dipper inheritance, then no matter where you were, as long as you were one of the 36 Heavenly Dipper saints on the saint rankings, you would be forcefully taken away. As for where you would be taken to, no one knew. Just as Long Yang had said, you could not resist the Heavenly Dipper inheritance. All you could do was obey. Immediately the world spun. Time seemed to have passed for a long time, but also seemed to have passed in an instant. When Xiao Qin regained consciousness again, he realized that he had appeared in a dark world. The surroundings were shrouded in endless darkness. However, above his head, 36 bright stars flickered with a gentle light. Xiao Qin looked around and sensed his own body at the same time. He found that his movements were not restricted at all in that place. Soon, figures appeared around Xiao Qin. These people were the 36 Heavenly Dipper saints on the saint rankings. There were a total of 36 people. Everyone was present. Among these people, Xiao Qin saw Xianyuan Baijian, Yun Kunyo, Long Yang, Tian Mushi, Tian Fun, and other people that he recognized. Of course, Xiao Qin did not recognize most of them, but that was not surprising. However, when the 36 Heavenly Dipper saints gathered together, everyone's eyes could not help but look at Long Yang, Tian Mushi, and the others. Long Yang and Tian Mushi were very familiar with Xiao Qin. However, at this moment, there was a handsome young man in golden robes beside the two of them. He had long golden hair, and his pupils were also golden. This was a young man who gave off a noble feeling at first glance. It was as if he was born as a god in the heavens and had to be worshipped by all living beings. This young man was called Shin Jun, and he was the first saint of the Shin clan. At the same time, he was also the first saint on the saint rankings of the Central World. In the eyes of the world, Shin Jun, Tianmushi, and Long Yang were the top 3 saints on the saint rankings. There was not much of a difference in their strength and status. However, for Shin Jun to be ranked first on the saint rankings by the will of the Heavenly Way, his status was still slightly higher than Tianmushi and Long Yang's in everyone's hearts. Of course, this had nothing to do with strength. After all, the Divine Lord had never defeated Tianmushi or Long Yang. It was only because the Divine Lord was ranked first on the saint rankings that his position in everyone's hearts was so high. The 3 of them represented the highest peak of the younger generation in the Central World. Now that the 3 of them were gathered together, it naturally attracted everyone's attention. Although everyone present was a heavenly dipper saint, Shin Jun, Tianmushi, and Long Yang's radiance still overshadowed the others. Under everyone's gaze, Shin Jun's golden eyes looked at Tianmushi and Long Yang as the corners of his mouth curled into a smile. "Long time no see. I'm not interested in meeting you," Long Yang said lazily. "I originally planned to go to the Shin clan to fight you, but now that the Heavenly Dipper inheritance has opened, there's no other way," Tianmushi said. The relationship between Shin Jun, Tianmushi, and Long Yang was somewhat complicated. They were rivals, but they were also somewhat like friends. At the same time, the 3 of them were also very familiar with each other. Being both friends and foes, this was the relationship between Shin Jun, Tianmushi, and Long Yang. However, this was normal when one thought about it. After all, in the entire Central World, the only people who could enter the eyes of these 3 people were probably their opponent. In the eyes of the 3 of them, the others were not worth paying attention to at all. Therefore, in addition to the constant competition between the 3 of them, they would also drink and chat together in their free time. This was a common occurrence. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.